Welcome to Uncloseted Conversations. Even if you stumbled upon this channel by accident, you are welcome here. The stories here are from my heart, from my soul, from my pen to your ears. I hope that you will stay a little longer and open yourself to the magic of storytelling. Here I write fiction, and though not always aligning with reality, it still tugs at heartstrings. Stories are escapes and sometimes a balm to the soul. So, enjoy your time here, and if reality presses down too loud and too hard, come knock at the door, come in, take a seat, grab a coffee, and just exhale. These are veil-bound stories, and the space is free and non-judgmental. Sit back, earphones or pods in, and let's listen to another exquisite romance. It started with a note, a hoop, and a neglected garden. A woman asks to use a hoop. Another woman says yes. And neither of them understands yet what they've agreed to. Chapter 1. The Strange Note. There was a soft knock at the door. Amara frowned before she realized she had. The sound was wrong, too careful for a delivery, too hesitant for a neighbor. She glanced at the time glowing on her tablet. 10:15 p.m. No one came this late. Not anymore. The room was dark except for the thin blue wash of the screen. The air conditioner hummed steadily, loyal, indifferent. She sat there a moment longer than necessary, as if stillness might explain the knock if she listened hard enough. It didn't. She stood. Her bare feet whispered against the wooden floor. Halfway to the door, a familiar tightening settled beneath her ribs, the quiet kind, the one she pretended was just fatigue. At the door, she leaned in and looked through the peephole. Nothing. No shadow shifting. No retreating footsteps. Just the hollow calm of a house that had learned how to keep its secrets. Her hand rose to the deadbolt. Stopped. She didn't know why. That was the unsettling part. The hesitation came without a story attached to it, just a pause, heavy and uninvited. For a moment, she considered stepping back, letting the knock become one more unanswered question she could fold away. Instead, her fingers curled around the handle. The door opened with a soft creak, the sound of something old remembering itself. Cool night air brushed her skin. The porch was empty. She scanned the street. Left. Right. Nothing. She was about to close the door when she saw it. A letter. It was stuck just below eye level, held there with care, as if whoever placed it didn't want it to fall. Amara glanced down the street again, absurdly, as though the silence might suddenly confess. It didn't. She peeled the envelope free. The handwriting was neat. Controlled. But there was a tension to it, the kind that comes from writing quickly before doubt can interfere. Someone had needed to finish this before they lost their nerve. Inside, she closed the door. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Not physically, emotionally. Like a thought she hadn't been ready to have. At the kitchen counter, she slid her finger beneath the seal. As the paper opened, a scent rose to meet her, sandalwood and earth. She froze. The smell struck something loose inside her, something old and buried and inconvenient. A memory stirred, half-formed, reaching, and she shut it down immediately. No. She unfolded the letter. Hi, I saw the basketball field at the back. Would you mind if I shoot a few hoops now and then? That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a simple request, respectful, almost shy. Amara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She didn't know anyone with that initial. Didn't want to guess either. Guessing required curiosity, and curiosity led places she wasn't interested in visiting. She set the letter down and leaned against the counter, her gaze drifting toward the darkened backyard. She could see it perfectly without the lights. The overgrown garden. The crooked fence. The basketball hoop standing stubborn and untouched. She'd thought about tearing it down more times than she could count. Always stopped herself. She told herself it was practical, time, effort, inconvenience. But the truth was simpler. She didn't know who she would be once it was gone. Now someone wanted to use it. Some stranger. Samar. The thought unsettled her more than it should have. She didn't owe them anything. The letter was anonymous. She could ignore it. She should ignore it. And yet, she moved to the bay window, resting her forehead briefly against the cool glass. Somewhere between the knock and the note, something inside her had shifted, Not broken, not healed, just loosened. A small, dangerous opening. Memories pressed closer now. 5 years old. Patient. Waiting. Amara exhaled slowly. She turned back to the counter, picked up the letter once more, then reached into the drawer for a notepad. Her hand didn't shake as she wrote. You're welcome to use the basketball hoop. Please be careful, the garden is overgrown. A. She stood there, staring at her own handwriting, surprised by it. Then she opened the door and placed the note where the other had been. When she closed it again, the house felt different. Not warmer, not lighter, but awake. Later, as she lay in bed, the quiet wrapped around her like it always did. But this time, it didn't feel quite as final. Somewhere deep in Amara Akadina's chest, something stirred, small, cautious, unmistakably alive. And for the first time in years, she didn't push it back down. Chapter 2, I was not ready. Everything changed that night Reese left. She let the memories flood back. The words arrived before Amara understood she was being wounded. You never saw me, Amara. Reese didn't shout. That was the cruel part. Her voice was steady, stripped of drama, as if she had already crossed some internal line and was speaking from the other side of it. You only saw what soothed your ego. Amara felt the sentence settle low in her body, heavy and precise. It didn't explode. It lodged. She opened her mouth, already assembling defenses she had used 100 times before. That's not true, she said quickly. Too quickly. Everything I do, I'm building a future for us. The words sounded reasonable. Sensible. Safe. They sounded nothing like love. Reese laughed once, short and sharp, like a crack in glass. She turned back to the bedroom, folding clothes with movements that were too controlled, too deliberate. The suitcase lay open on the bed between them like a verdict that had already been reached. A future, Reese repeated, not looking at her. You talk about it like it's a place I'm supposed to wait quietly for. Amara followed her into the room, the space suddenly unfamiliar. Their room. Their bed. Their life folded into neat piles. I work this hard for us, Amara insisted. For stability. For you, Reese interrupted. She stopped packing then. Stood very still. When she finally turned, her eyes were red but dry. That hurt more than tears would have. I was lonely with you, Reese said. Do you understand how terrifying that is? Amara didn't answer. She couldn't. Understanding arrived too late and all at once, crowding her chest. Reese shoved the last of her clothes into the suitcase and zipped it shut with a finality that echoed. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, angry at herself for the weakness, and dragged the case toward the door. Amara stood frozen, every instinct screaming to fix this, to negotiate, to promise something larger and shinier and later. But Reese didn't want later. At the door, she paused. Her hand hovered over the handle. She didn't turn around right away. You know what hurts the most? Reese said softly. I don't think you ever meant to be cruel. That's when Amara felt herself fracture. Reese finally looked at her then, eyes sharp with grief and resolve. You will die alone, Amara, she said. No one will love you, not really. And not all your money will save you. The words were a blade, sharpened by truth and rage and love that had nowhere left to go. Then she was gone. The door closed. The house inhaled. And Amara stood there, staring at a space that refused to explain itself. Where had everything unraveling to this? She closed her eyes and remembered them in a different time. They had met at a community fundraiser, two women standing at the edge of a room, equally unimpressed by polite conversation and warm white wine. Reese had leaned in and whispered something about dressing up like Cinderella just to leave before midnight. Amara laughed. Harder than she had in years. 5 months later, they were sharing keys. Toothbrushes. Mornings that felt like beginnings. They bought the house together. Painted the walls. Planted the garden. Reese insisted on the basketball hoop, calling it her way of shaking the day loose. Tension relief, she'd said, grinning, sweat on her neck, alive in a way Amara had loved but never quite joined. 3 years later, Amara's company had grown teeth. Demands multiplied. Hours disappeared. Their love didn't survive the strain. Reese left. But the house stayed. So did the hoop. Now, 5 years later, Amara stood alone in the kitchen, the memory pressing close, sharp as it had ever been. She had built exactly the life Reese accused her of choosing. Quiet. Successful. Empty. Her eyes drifted to the letter on the counter. She read it again. Would you mind if I shoot a few hoops now and then? A ridiculous thing to undo a life. And yet, later, in bed, she told herself she had simply been kind. A neighborly gesture. Nothing more. But beneath the practiced logic, something shifted, subtle, insistent. A truth she hadn't faced in 5 years stirred awake. She hadn't been unlovable. She had been unavailable. And somewhere in the dark, the sentence Reese left her with began, for the first time, to loosen its grip. Chapter 3. R is revealed. Morning came without ceremony. Amara left the house early, the sky still undecided between night and day. Her suitcase stood by the door, compact, efficient, everything she prized. She moved through her routine on instinct, keys, phone, coat. No hesitation this time. The note was gone from the door. She noticed that. Told herself it meant nothing. The drive out of the neighborhood was quiet, familiar. Rows of houses still sleeping. Lawns waiting for someone else to care. As she turned onto the main road, the thought surfaced uninvited. I said yes. She pushed it aside and focused on the day ahead, back-to-back meetings, contracts to negotiate, a 2-week conference in Medina that would leave her voice hoarse and her mind numb. Forward motion had always been her safest place. The city rose to meet her in glass and steel. Her office tower caught the morning sun and fractured it into color, all sharp lines and ambition. She stepped into the elevator, accepted the coffee her assistant offered, nodded through briefings and messages. By 9 a.m., Amara Akadina was fully assembled. Whatever had stirred the night before stayed behind, pressed into the walls of her house like a secret. Across the street, and 3 houses down, Roxandra Lahovary tightened the straps on the last crate in the back of her truck. She paused, assessing the load the way she assessed everything, quietly, thoroughly, without commentary. Soil bags. Tools. Saplings wrapped in burlap. The smell of earth clung to her hands no matter how often she washed them. Good, she thought. The Ford Ranger roared to life beneath her. She backed out slowly, careful not to rush the morning. Rux liked starting her days this way, grounded, physical, real. Plants didn't lie. Gardens didn't pretend. As she rolled past the familiar house, she eased off the accelerator. There was a new note on the door. Rux let the truck idle at the curb and climbed out, keys still in hand. The street was empty, the quiet stretched thin like early light. She approached the door without urgency, as if she already knew what she would find. R, the gate is temperamental, but you're welcome to use the basketball hoop. She smiled. Not wide. Not careless. Just enough. Permission given without interrogation. That alone told her something. She folded the note once, carefully, and slid it into her pocket. As she walked back to the truck, she glanced toward the backyard, toward the overgrown garden she had noticed weeks ago. The hoop hadn't been what caught her attention. It was the neglect around it. The way something once tended had been left to fend for itself. Not abandoned, just avoided. Rux knew that terrain intimately. She drove off, 5 jobs lined up, soil waiting for her hands. Work she understood. Work that didn't ask her to explain who she was or why she kept certain doors closed. Still, the house stayed with her. Not the structure. The woman. Guarded. Precise. Carrying her solitude like armor. That look wasn't loneliness exactly, it was vigilance. The kind that came from having once let someone all the way in. Rux had worn it herself, once. At a red light, she rested her forearms on the steering wheel, exhaled slowly, and shook the thought loose. Curiosity was a dangerous thing. She had built a life that worked. A business that thrived. Hands in soil. Feet on ground. She didn't need complications. And yet, tonight, after work, she would bring a ball. Just to shoot a few hoops. Nothing more. Neither woman knew it yet, but something irreversible had already begun, not with desire, not with longing, but with recognition. Two lives, long practiced in self-containment, had quietly agreed to share a small, forgotten space. And sometimes, that was all it took for the world to tilt. Chapter 4. What changed while she was gone? Amara's house did not miss her. It waited. For 2 weeks, the lights stayed off. The mailbox filled. The backyard lay untouched, the hoop standing as it always had, except now, sometimes, it was used. Rux came in the evenings. Not every night. Only when the day had settled enough to release her from it. She parked down the street, slung the ball under her arm, and slipped through the side gate without ceremony. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't need to. The first night, she only shot for 15 minutes. Short sets. Clean arcs. The sound of the ball striking pavement echoed softly, then faded. She left the garden exactly as she found it. The second night, she noticed the ivy choking the fence. By the fourth, she brought gloves. Rux never assumed permission beyond what she'd been given. She worked the way she always did, slow, deliberate, with an attention that bordered on reverence. She trimmed without erasing, cleared without rearranging. She didn't pull anything up that looked like it had once been loved. Some plants responded immediately. Others resisted, roots tangled in neglect. She respected that too. Between shots, she knelt in the soil, fingers dark with earth. The garden wasn't dead, just paused, waiting for someone to notice it again. Rux understood waiting. Inside the house, absence softened the air. Dust settled differently. Silence shifted. The kitchen clock ticked louder, then quieter, as if adjusting to a new rhythm. The windows caught light they hadn't before. The garden began to look intentional, not restored, not transformed, just tended. Amara returned on a Sunday afternoon, jet-lagged, drained, already mentally cataloging emails she would answer later that night. She parked in her driveway and sat for a moment longer than necessary, one hand resting on the steering wheel. Travel always did this to her. Left her unmoored. She stepped out of the car and froze, not dramatically, not consciously, but enough to register something off. The yard looked different. She couldn't have said how. The overgrowth wasn't gone. The hoop still stood. Nothing obvious had changed. And yet, the garden felt less abandoned. The fence visible in places it hadn't been before. The air carried a faint scent of turned soil. Amara frowned, dismissed it as imagination, and hauled her suitcase inside. Later that night, unpacking, she glanced out the back window. The hoop stood alone in the fading light. She didn't notice the freshly cleared line beneath the hedge. Didn't see the careful way the ivy had been redirected instead of removed. Didn't know that someone had been there, moving gently through her history without disturbing it. But her shoulders loosened without explanation. She slept better than she had in months. Across the street, Rux cleaned her tools and stacked them in the garage. She didn't expect thanks. Didn't want acknowledgement. Some things were better left unclaimed. Still, she wondered briefly if the woman in the quiet house would feel it. Not the work. The care. They had not met. But the space between them had already been altered by rhythm, by respect, by the kind of presence that doesn't announce itself. And when they finally would meet, neither of them would understand why it felt like recognition instead of introduction. Chapter 5, almost. Amara noticed the sound first. It was late afternoon, the hour when light softened and the house began to feel less like a holding space and more like a place someone might choose. She stood at the kitchen counter, coffee cooling in her hand, staring out at the backyard without really seeing it. Then, thump. The sound was distant. Hollow. Rhythmic. She frowned. Thump. Thump. A basketball. The realization landed slowly, followed by a flicker of irritation that surprised her. She hadn't expected this. Whoever R was, they had taken her yes seriously. Too seriously, perhaps. Amara set the mug down and walked toward the back door. She stopped before opening it, hand resting on the frame. She didn't feel ready to be seen. Instead, she crossed to the bay window, the one angled just enough to look out without announcing her presence. The sight unsettled her. The garden, her garden, was different again. More than before. Lines she didn't remember clearing were now visible. The ivy had been guided, not hacked back. The chaos had softened into something almost deliberate. And at the center of it, a woman. She stood beneath the hoop, sleeves rolled up, honey blonde hair pulled back carelessly. The ball left her hands with practiced ease, struck the rim, fell cleanly through. No hurry. No show. Amara felt something tighten in her chest. The woman retrieved the ball, dribbling once, twice, then paused, eyes lifting, scanning the space as if sensing a presence. Amara stepped back instinctively, heart thudding too loudly for the quiet room. She told herself it was nothing. A neighbor. A stranger using what she'd offered. She had no obligation beyond that. Still, she stayed where she was, hidden, listening to the rhythm outside. The woman shot a few more times, then set the ball aside. Amara watched her kneel in the soil, gloved hands moving gently through leaves and stems. That's when it hit her. The garden hadn't changed on its own. Someone had been tending it. Carefully. Respectfully. As if they understood what it meant to touch something that wasn't theirs. Amara swallowed. Outside, Rux stood and dusted off her knees. She glanced toward the house again, toward the window, this time, and frowned slightly. Not suspicion. Awareness. Rux felt it then. The unmistakable sensation of being near someone who was there, even if unseen. She resisted the instinct to look too closely, to linger. Some thresholds mattered. She gathered her things, slipped the ball under her arm, and headed toward the gate. The latch clicked softly. The sound echoed through Amara like a held breath finally released. She remained at the window long after the yard had gone still again. Later that evening, Amara stepped outside. The air smelled faintly of earth and something warmer, sandalwood, maybe. She couldn't be sure. The garden looked cared for. Not transformed. Just studied. As if someone had touched it and then known when to stop. Amara wrapped her arms around herself, unsettled by the quiet gratitude blooming where defensiveness should have been. Across the street, Rux sat on her porch, unlacing her boots. She hadn't seen the woman, but she knew she'd been close. Close enough to matter. They would not talk tonight. But the space between them had narrowed, no longer empty, no longer neutral. It had weight now. And neither of them slept quite as easily because of it. Chapter 6. The Garden Speaks. Amara woke the morning after her first quiet glimpse of the yard. The jet lag was gone, but something else remained, a tension she couldn't place. A sense. She dressed quickly, made herself coffee, and carried it to the backyard. Light spilled across the garden, brushing the overgrown corners. She paused, chest tightening, because the garden looked different. Not better, not worse. Just steadier. Balanced. Her eyes traced the lines of the ivy along the fence. Where before it had sprawled and tangled, it now curved gracefully, like a river finding its bed. Leaves she didn't remember trimming were neatly aligned, edges softened. She knelt instinctively to inspect a small cluster of marigolds, and they felt planted right, unshaken, unhurried. Her lips parted, but no words came. The air smelled faintly of earth, damp and alive, but too clean to be only rain. Someone had been here. Someone had tended. And yet, there were no footprints she could see, no evidence left behind. No signature. Just the whisper of presence. Amara's fingers hovered over the plants, brushing a leaf as if testing a memory. She felt a strange warmth in her chest, like a pulse she didn't know she'd been holding. Not irritation. Not anger. Curiosity. Recognition. Unease. Something new, small, but insistent. She walked through the yard slowly, scanning, turning, peering into shadows where she expected chaos. Nothing untended. Nothing broken. Nothing missing. Just quiet care. Her hands fell to her sides. She exhaled. And then froze. A ball lay near the hoop. Clean. Perfectly positioned, as if it had been placed for her notice. She bent, picked it up, rolled it in her palms. The weight was familiar. Ordinary. And yet, the message was clear. I have been here. I have seen this place. I respect it. You don't have to. She looked around again. No one. No sound except the faint hum of the morning, the occasional bird. Amara straightened. Something loosened in her chest, something that had been clenched since Reese left. She didn't know whether it was gratitude or fear, pride or relief. She only knew it mattered. And she didn't have to confront it with words. She didn't have to face the woman herself. Not yet. The garden had spoken. And Amara listened. She returned to the house, leaving the ball where it was, letting the subtle shift linger in the air. Quietly, invisibly, the world had changed in a way that might one day demand attention, but for now it only asked for notice. Amara sipped her coffee and closed her eyes. Something small and alive had entered her life. Something she didn't understand. And that was enough. Chapter 7. Quiet Awareness. The truck was parked in the driveway by the time the sun sank low, painting everything gold and copper. Rux removed her gloves, rubbed dirt from her palms, and leaned against the side of the truck, letting her body stretch after kneeling in the garden for hours. She had done the work with care as she always did. Not for recognition. Not for thanks. Just because the plants had deserved it. But tonight, something lingered in the air that wasn't soil or leaves. Something lighter. More stubborn. She thought of the house. The silent windows. The way the backyard had responded to her hands, the subtle shift in angles she hadn't touched herself. Lines straightened where chaos had once ruled. Growth that had been hesitant now stretched confidently toward the sun. Rux frowned. I didn't touch all of this. And yet, it isn't the same as I found it. She couldn't explain why that mattered. She hadn't been seeking influence, hadn't wanted to leave a mark. Still, she felt the tug of something she wasn't supposed to feel. Curiosity. Concern. The faint edge of interest. Her gaze drifted to the windows where she thought she glimpsed movement. Probably a trick of the light. But maybe not. The thought lingered like a shadow she couldn't quite chase away. Rux drew a deep breath. She liked her life controlled, deliberate, predictable. Her gardens, her teams, her routines, they obeyed her. They rewarded her. They didn't demand anything in return. Except, now there was this. A presence she couldn't see clearly. A house that felt watched or maybe aware. She didn't like surprises, and yet she couldn't dismiss the quiet satisfaction that prickled at her spine. She shook her head, cleaned her tools, stacked them neatly in the truck bed. Stay out of it. Just leave it be. But as she slid into the driver's seat and turned the key, she couldn't stop thinking about the subtle shift. Not the letters. Not the hoop. The response, even without seeing it, even without knowing what form it had taken. Rux exhaled, slow, steady, and started the engine. She'd come back. She always came back. Not because she wanted to confront it. Not because she expected notice. Because the garden had asked her to. And sometimes you obeyed what mattered. Even if it wasn't your business. Chapter 8. Alina's Observation. The morning sun poured through the wide windows of Lahovary Landscaping's main office. Alina Lahovary, impeccably dressed, already had a steaming cup of espresso in hand as she reviewed the day's schedules. She prided herself on precision. Meetings, budgets, employee check-ins, everything was a grid she could navigate blindfolded. Her office door opened, and Roxandra walked in, hair still a little loose from the night, boots dusted with soil, jeans marked with the faint lines of kneeling. She carried herself with the familiar quiet confidence that had built their company from the ground up. But today, Alina noticed a subtle shift. It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't pride. It was something quieter, more insistent. You okay? Alina asked lightly, tilting her head, sipping her espresso. Rux paused, tensed for a fraction of a second, then shook her head with a faint smile. Yeah, just a long night in the garden. Alina didn't press. She rarely did. Her sister didn't reveal her mind easily. But she made a mental note. Something had changed. Rux had been coming back from jobs, yes, but there was a lightness in her step this week, a small rhythm in the way she moved through the office. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but there. You've been different, Alina said, letting the words hang, careful, like testing a fragile wire. Rux raised an eyebrow, dismissive. Different good or different bad? Harder to tell. You're present, Alina admitted, leaning back in her chair. Focused, but softer somehow. Not distracted exactly, just, her voice faltered. I don't know, Rux. You're noticing things. Feeling things. Plants don't lie, do they? Rux blinked, glancing toward the window at a fern that leaned slightly toward the light. Her jaw tightened briefly. No, they don't. Alina smiled faintly, sensing the tension in the room, sensing Rux's stubbornness to name it. Then maybe whatever's got you noticing them is worth paying attention to. Rux shook her head, standing straight. She wouldn't admit it, not here, not now. It's work. That's all. Alina didn't press further. But as Rux strode back toward the door to check on Cruz in the field, her sister watched her go and thought, something's happening out there. Something Rux is too stubborn to see. And maybe, just maybe, she hoped it wouldn't take breaking anything or anyone to make Rux notice it herself. Chapter 9. Alina watches. The office buzzed with energy, phones ringing, keyboards tapping, the usual symphony of a business that never slept. Alina moved from desk to desk, checking in on employees, adjusting schedules, nodding at reports. She was in her element, and she expected Roxandra to be, too. But she noticed her sister's hands trembling slightly as she sorted invoices. Small, almost imperceptible movements, the way she adjusted her sleeves repeatedly, the faint line of distraction in her eyes. Rux, Alina said casually, leaning against a counter. Everything okay? Rux blinked, caught mid-calculation, and forced a shrug. Yeah, just busy. Alina didn't press. She had learned long ago that Rux didn't share unless she chose to. But that didn't mean she wouldn't notice. Busy is fine, Alina said gently. You seem a little off today. Not like yourself. Rux shook her head, letting a small, tired smile curve her lips. Really, I'm fine. Just a lot to manage. The cruise, the gardens, you know how it is. Alina studied her younger sister. The one who had always been fiercely independent, self-contained, even stubborn. Yet, beneath the layers of composure, Alina could see the subtle signs of unrest, quiet, restrained, yet persistent. She didn't pry, didn't make her sister defend herself. That wasn't her way. She simply watched. Because sometimes, watching was enough. Sometimes, it was the only way to be there for someone who wouldn't let you in. Rux returned to her desk, adjusting papers and schedules, trying to push aside the fluttering awareness she couldn't name. She didn't mention the garden. Didn't mention the hoops. Didn't acknowledge that a certain quiet presence had been altering the space she'd been tending so carefully. Alina let her go, satisfied for now. She would notice. She would keep noticing. She just wanted her sister to be okay, even if Rux refused to admit she might not be. And that was enough for the moment. Chapter 10. The Garden Breathes. Evening settled softly across the neighborhood. The golden light caught the leaves and highlighted the edges of the basketball hoop. Rux parked her truck a few houses down, the engine clicking off. She carried her gloves and a small basket of tools, moving quietly as if the yard itself might startle at her approach. The garden welcomed her. She could feel it, the plants leaned toward her hands, the soil soft beneath her knees, the neglected corners subtly bracing for attention. She didn't rush. She never did. Work, to her, was a dialogue, not a conquest. First, she tended the ivy along the fence. She nudged it gently, coaxing tangled strands into lines that looked purposeful but untouched by aggression. Then the marigolds, which had survived months of disregard, now stood straighter, brighter. She whispered encouragement under her breath, not because the plants needed it, but because she needed the rhythm, the silent recognition of growth. The basketball hoop loomed in the background. She dribbled once, twice, softly, letting the ball's thump echo in the quiet. It was enough to keep her presence visible but not intrusive. She paused, hands on her knees, surveying her work. The yard looked acknowledged, alive. Still the same, yet subtly different. Her touch had left no scars. Only small corrections, careful adjustments. Presence without demand. Care without expectation. Rux leaned back on her heels and exhaled. The work had a pulse, a breathing rhythm she could feel. The house itself seemed to sigh along with her, a quiet shift in the air, as if it had recognized her efforts. She packed up her tools and carried them to the truck, leaving the garden exactly as it had become, tended, not tamed, observed, not claimed. Before she left, she glanced back. The hoop, the lines, the subtle order she'd introduced, they were small, invisible gestures, but gestures that mattered. And for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder, not in words, not in confession, but in the quiet space between thought and action, if the woman who lived here would notice. Probably not. But maybe someday. Rux slipped back into the truck, leaving the garden breathing. Leaving a presence behind that didn't announce itself, yet would quietly awaken something inside the house. Chapter 11. The Subtle Shift. Amara returned home later that evening, her arms full of groceries and the remnants of her business trip still clinging to her in the form of tight shoulders and a restless mind. She set the bags down and paused. The backyard caught her attention immediately, not because it was different in any dramatic way, but because it felt alive. Different. Subtle. She stepped outside, the fresh scents hitting her nose subtly. The ivy along the fence leaned in straighter than she remembered, edges of leaves smoothed and purposeful. The marigolds glimmered faintly under the fading light, standing taller, more confident. The soil in the flower beds looked gently turned, as if someone had walked through and whispered reassurance to it. Amara frowned, a small, instinctive tightening in her chest. She stepped closer, brushing a hand over a leaf over the soil. Nothing was out of place. Nothing broken. And yet, something had changed. She picked up the basketball that had rolled to the side. The ball felt familiar in her hands, ordinary in weight, yet impossible to ignore. It was positioned perfectly, just enough to catch her attention, yet not demanding acknowledgement. A whisper of fragrance, earth, faint sandalwood, brushed past her senses. She paused mid-step, inhaling, feeling a ripple in her chest she couldn't name. The yard felt watched? No, not watched. Not in the invasive sense. Acknowledged. That was it. Someone had been here, present, but careful. Respectful. Her lips pressed together, a faint smile tugging at the corners. She didn't know why it mattered, didn't know why her heart was already tugging at the invisible threads laid down in her absence. All she knew was that someone had entered her world quietly, without announcement, and the air itself seemed softer for it. She shook her head, exhaling slowly, leaving the ball where it lay. She turned to enter the house, lingering for a final glance. The hoop, the garden, the faint lines of care, small, subtle, almost invisible, pulled at her chest in ways she couldn't name. Amara stepped inside, carrying with her the silent, unspoken truth. Something had changed, and she had noticed. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel that maybe she wouldn't be entirely alone after all. Chapter 12. A Conversation in the Garden. 2 weeks had passed. Amara's routine had returned to its carefully orchestrated rhythm. Emails answered, meetings attended, deadlines met. Yet, every evening, when she crossed the threshold into her backyard, she felt the subtle pulse of something unfamiliar and insistent. The garden had changed. Not dramatically, not overtly, but undeniably. The ivy traced smoother lines along the fence, marigolds and petunias leaned slightly as if in anticipation. The soil felt nurtured in ways she couldn't have achieved herself. She paused one evening, hands resting on the railing of the deck, and inhaled. The air smelled of earth and something faintly floral, something warmer, intimate, almost human. A sense of presence nudged at her awareness. Not visible, not spoken, but undeniably there. Amara knelt, letting her fingers brush the turned soil near the flower beds. She felt it then, a rhythm, a pulse, a quiet conversation she hadn't realized she had been craving. Each plant seemed to hold a fragment of intention, a gentle insistence that someone had noticed, had cared, had been there. She straightened, her chest stirring with unfamiliar warmth. She could almost hear it, a cadence in the garden's quiet, a language of care and attention that was unspoken yet unmistakable. It pulled at her in a way she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, not since Reese, not since the solitude had fully settled into her bones. The basketball lay at the base of the hoop. Ordinary. But it carried the echo of someone else's presence. She picked it up, rolled it between her hands, and felt a trace of movement in the air, almost like a reply to her silent recognition. Amara exhaled slowly. She didn't know if she was imagining it, didn't know if the garden itself was speaking or if it was something else entirely. But a small, dangerous spark had ignited in her chest, one that whispered of connection, of acknowledgement, of someone noticing her even when she hadn't asked to be noticed. She placed the ball back and leaned against the railing, eyes tracing the neat lines of the ivy, the subtle curves she had come to associate with care. Somewhere, she realized, someone had entered her world and had chosen to respect it. And in that respect, in that quiet presence, she found herself craving more. The conversation was happening, silently, invisibly, and it was just enough. Her lips curved in a faint, private smile. And somewhere in the quiet of the neighborhood, Rux was already preparing for another evening in the garden, unaware that her care had become a language that Amara was learning to understand. Chapter 13. Saturday morning. Amara woke to a soft vibration in the quiet of the house. Not an alarm. Not the city. A low hum, gentle and steady, threading through the floorboards beneath her bedroom window. She didn't move. Didn't sit up. She let the sound carry her attention outward, curiosity sparking in the dim light. Then a voice. Low. Warm. Soft, yet firm. It carried a rhythm that made her pulse quicken in a way that startled her. And here, just a little more, see? You can stretch, grow, yes, that's it. The words weren't meant for her. They were spoken to the garden, to the plants, as if the soil itself could respond, as if the leaves could hear. Amara lay still, her heartbeat catching in her chest. Every slow inhale filled her with a rising heat she didn't understand, a longing she hadn't realized was buried beneath years of solitude. The hum returned, soft and steady, weaving around the low voice. She traced it in her mind, imagining the woman kneeling, hands moving with care, speaking in this private language of nurture and attention. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Amara didn't move. She didn't want to disturb it. She didn't want to see it yet. She only listened, allowing herself to feel a pulse she hadn't expected, hadn't dared to acknowledge. Finally, a quiet shuffle of movement. A gate clicking softly. Footsteps retreating. Amara rose from the bed, attention winding tight and stretching her chest. She padded quietly to the back door, peering out. The yard was empty. Sunlight touched the edges of the garden, illuminating the subtle lines Rux had created over the weeks. But it was the final trace that drew her breath, there, leaving the space a lingering presence. Strong arms under rolled-up sleeves, faint muscles flexing in casual motion. A scent carried on the morning air, earth, yes, but something else, warmer, intimate, sandalwood, subtle but unmistakable. Amara's fingers brushed the railing, her body still absorbing the echo of the voice, the hum, the rhythm of attention that had been hers without ever meeting her. She exhaled slowly, letting the heat of her chest settle just enough to be bearable. The woman was gone, leaving behind only the trace of movement, scent, and care. And Amara realized deep in a place she hadn't known was hungry, that she had been waiting for this. Waiting for someone to speak, to notice, to reach without asking. Without words, without confrontation, without a name. Just presence. And it had arrived. Chapter 14. The Tug. Amara sat at the edge of her bed, sunlight streaking across the wooden floor, fingers curled around the mug of coffee she barely drank. The hum, the low voice, the warmth of movement she had glimpsed replayed in her mind, insistent, teasing, almost unbearable. Her heartbeat felt loud in the quiet room. She tried to push it away, tried to bury the pull of the garden's silent conversation, the rhythm of hands that coaxed life out of soil like it was breathing in her own pulse. I shouldn't. She shook her head, recalling the sharp edges of Reese's voice. You will die alone, Amara. No one will love you. You will be alone forever. The memory cut into her, tight and bitter. The caution nested in her chest tightened, urging her to retreat, to stay behind closed doors, to keep her heart and curiosity safely contained. But the plants. The plants themselves seemed alive with something more than sunlight. A faint shimmer in the leaves, a subtle vibrance as if they had been waiting, and now they leaned toward her, insistent in their silent encouragement. Tender hands, gentle touch, a voice that spoke not to her directly, but through the living garden itself, and it stirred a longing that refused to be ignored. Amara's fingers itched to reach out. Her feet itched to cross the threshold. Her body ached to inhale the scent that lingered, sandalwood and earth, wrapping around her senses like an unspoken promise. But what if it's a mistake? Her chest constricted at the thought, Reese's warning hammering again, fear tightening its grip. She didn't trust herself, didn't trust that her heart could survive being drawn toward something unknown, something tender, something alive in ways she hadn't allowed herself in years. And yet, her eyes drifted to the window, to the garden, to the subtle signs of care that had transformed her yard, her space, her quiet world. Every curve of the ivy, every marigold standing straighter than yesterday, whispered of presence, of attention, of connection. Her lips parted slightly. Her hands clenched and unclenched on the mug. She wanted it, the voice, the hands, the quiet intimacy that seemed to pulse through the soil itself. She wanted it fiercely, and yet she was frozen by fear. Her heartbeat slowed slightly, but the ache remained. She took a deep, deliberate breath, trying to calm the storm that was raging between longing and caution. Amara Akadina, master of control, whispered to herself, "Tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll decide." And for the first time in 5 years, she let the garden hold her desire, let it speak the words she couldn't, let it remind her that sometimes life, tender, patient, deliberate, moved faster than fear ever could. Chapter 15. The First Glance. The morning was soft, the light spilling over the garden in golden threads. Amara lingered at her bedroom window, drawn by the subtle rhythm of hums and murmurs she had come to crave. She stepped outside cautiously, bare feet brushing the cool wooden deck, drawn forward by a heartbeat that didn't belong solely to her. And then she saw her. Rux crouched among the flower beds, hands deep in the soil, rolling up stray leaves, adjusting marigolds with precise care. Her voice, low and melodic, spoke to the plants as though they could understand every word, coaxing them towards sunlight and growth. The sight stole Amara's breath. Not just the strength in the arms, the lean muscles flexing with each movement, or the graceful way Rux's hair fell into her face, but the totality of her presence, alive, deliberate, intimate. The garden thrummed with attention, every leaf leaning slightly toward her touch. Amara stepped a little closer, instinctively drawn, and the sound of her foot on the stone path made Rux freeze. Her hands paused mid-motion. Slowly, she lifted her head, and for the first time, her eyes met Amara's. Time slowed. Rux's breath hitched just slightly, a flicker of surprise, a flicker of something deeper. There was an intensity in the woman before her, the quiet strength, the contained warmth, the faint pulse of longing and restraint that she hadn't anticipated. Amara felt it too. Heart thudding, pulse quickened, limbs hesitant. She wanted to speak, to move, to cross the space between them, but the moment itself was weighty, suspended. Words were unnecessary. The garden, the sunlight, the soft hum of presence held them both in a fragile equilibrium. Rux exhaled softly, a subtle acknowledgement of the encounter, yet she instinctively stepped back, retreating to the margin of the yard. The truck waited, indifferent but present. She climbed in, the faint scent of sandalwood lingering in the morning air, a quiet signature of her passage. Amara stood rooted, fingers brushing a leaf, trying to absorb the shock of proximity, the weight of that first glance. The garden around her whispered with life, almost approving, almost teasing, an unspoken conversation she hadn't known she'd been craving. When Rux's truck rumbled down the street, the moment was gone, but the air remained charged. The garden hummed, the marigolds swayed, and Amara felt, for the first time in years, the pull of someone who had entered her world quietly, deliberately, and left her wanting more. Chapter 16. Replaying Presence. Amara closed the door softly behind her, the lingering hum of Rux's voice still vibrating in her chest. She leaned against the frame, eyes half closed, letting the memory of the morning settle into her senses like a rich, unexpected perfume. The scent followed her. The earth, warmed by sunlight, dusted with faint sandalwood, a hint of rosemary or thyme perhaps, plants alive under hands that understood them, that coaxed life gently without claiming it. Her mind traced the arms she had seen, strong, capable, yet intimate in their care. Romanian, she thought, her heart skipping. There was something in the way Rux spoke to the plants, soft but deliberate, the slight cadence of another language folding into the rhythm of English, subtle vowels lingering, like music she didn't know she had missed. It brushed against her ears in memory, teasing her curiosity, stirring something tender and urgent she hadn't felt in years. Amara inhaled slowly. The scent, the warmth, the rhythm of the garden, the unseen presence, it clung to her. Each inhalation felt like a small confession her body made without words. I want it. I want her here. I want this. Yet, fear pressed against her ribs, sharp and bitter, the ghost of Reese's words slicing through. You die alone. No one will love you. You will always be alone. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart race, the tug of desire wriggling against caution. Her fingers brushed a leaf near the window, the smooth texture grounding her, yet also echoing the faint connection of Rux's touch. Amara's thoughts drifted to her heritage, the quiet pride of being Armenian, the learned discipline of restraint, of measured gestures, of hiding passion until it could not be contained. And yet, Rux, Romanian, strong, earthy, warm, grounded in soil and presence, had entered her ordered world like a spark through the veins of her body. The garden hummed quietly in her memory, as if echoing the silent conversation she had been part of, though she had not yet spoken a word. The plants leaned toward Rux, had leaned toward her in that moment, and Amara realized she had been craving this, the attentive presence, the subtle dialogue, the warmth of hands and soil and sunlight, and she hadn't known it. Her pulse slowed, but the ache remained, the memory stubborn, curling through her chest. She allowed herself one long exhale, soft, private, a surrender to the lingering trace of someone she barely knew, but who had touched her world irrevocably. And somewhere in the quiet of her mind, Amara whispered to the garden, almost inaudibly, almost daring herself to admit it. Come back. Please come back. Chapter 17. Rux's Reflection. The truck rumbled softly along the street as Rux drove away from the garden. Hands rested lightly on the wheel, but her mind remained rooted in the backyard she had just left. She had seen her fully for the first time, the way she moved, quiet but deliberate, every line of her posture exact yet unguarded in the private space of her own yard. The sunlight had caught her hair in a halo, framing the faint curve of her jaw, the gentle tension in her shoulders. And those eyes that held a mix of caution, lingering sorrow, and a restrained hunger that mirrored the pulse Rux had felt in the plants themselves. Rux exhaled slowly, a faint smile brushing her lips. Romanian pragmatism told her to step back, to measure, to respect boundaries. She had always been careful, taught by years of living between worlds, balancing her independence with the quiet observation of life around her. But something about the woman, the careful strength, the subtle elegance, the faint scent of her presence lingering in the air, shook that balance. She thought of the plants she had tended, how each leaf, each blossom had responded, almost as if they, too, recognized the woman. She had not intended to notice, had not intended to be affected. Yet in the silence, the scent of earth and sunlight mixing with her own subtle traces of sandalwood, she had felt it, a pull, quiet, insistent, undeniable. Rux flexed her fingers against the wheel, feeling a tension she could not name. Desire? Curiosity? Admiration? All three coiled together, a rhythm she had not allowed herself in years. She hated the unbidden tug in her chest, Romanian pride, self-reliance, discipline, all whispered to resist, to retreat. Yet, even as she obeyed, even as she climbed into the truck and prepared to leave, she knew something had shifted. Amara Akadina had entered her carefully ordered world, unannounced, unassuming, and left a trace that would not be ignored. The memory of the first glance lingered, the way Amara had frozen, the faint pulse of tension in her chest, the subtle acknowledgement of presence without expectation. Rux's own pulse mimicked it, a quiet echo of the moment they had shared, silent and fleeting yet monumental. She inhaled, letting the scent of earth, the faint traces of sandalwood, the warm morning air fill her lungs. She let herself imagine carefully, sparingly, the possibility of seeing Amara again, of stepping closer, of speaking to her not just to the garden, not just in whispers of hands in soil, but to her entirely. And for the first time that morning, Rux smiled without restraint, eyes briefly closing as the memory of the encounter played again, vivid, tactile, unignorable. Tomorrow, she thought, perhaps tomorrow. Chapter 18. The Garden Meeting. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and sandalwood. Amara lingered at the window again, drawn by a rhythm she no longer denied, fingers curling around the railing as though it could anchor her racing heart. When she stepped outside, the garden greeted her differently this time. The marigolds, the ivy, even the soil itself seemed to lean toward her, as if aware of her presence. And there, kneeling near the flower beds, Rux was already at work. Honey-blonde hair caught the sunlight, shimmering like strands of spun gold. Sea-blue eyes, striking against the sun-kissed skin of her cheeks, glanced up just as Amara's hazel gaze met them. Time slowed. The brief surprise in Rux's eyes mirrored the small tremor in Amara's chest. Both froze for a heartbeat, suspended in a quiet awareness of each other. "Good morning," Amara whispered, voice low, almost afraid to disturb the delicate tension. Rux smiled, a hint of curiosity tugging at her lips. She rose to her knees, brushing soil from her gloves, hands strong and capable, yet careful, deliberate. "Morning," she said softly, the faint Romanian cadence coloring the word without meaning to. Amara took a slow step forward, eyes tracing the curve of Rux's shoulders, the sunlight catching the strands of her hair, the subtle warmth radiating from her presence. I'm A, she said, almost shyly, as if speaking the name gave form to a connection that had been building silently for weeks. Rux tilted her head, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, then smiled wider. "R," she replied simply, extending a hand dusted with soil. The gesture was tentative, deliberate, bridging the gap between curiosity and intention. A shiver ran down Amara's spine as she took the hand. Strong, warm, grounding. A silent promise, unspoken yet undeniable. The garden seemed to hum in approval around them, the marigold swaying, the ivy leaning, the soil alive with acknowledgement. They stood there for a long moment, two strangers who had known each other without knowing, suspended between the pull of desire and the caution of restraint. Sunlight glinted in Rux's sea-blue eyes, mirrored faintly in Amara's hazel gaze, and for a heartbeat, nothing else existed but the shared space between them. Rux released her hand first, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've been meaning to check on this corner," she said, gesturing subtly to the flower bed she had tended. Her voice was casual, yet the tone held more than just words. Amara nodded, feeling warmth rise to her cheeks, pulse quickening. "It looks perfect," she whispered. Her eyes lingered on the tender adjustments, the subtle care, and the presence of herself. Rux glanced at her, faintly amused, faintly intrigued. "Thank you." Amara smiled, feeling the name settle in her chest like a spark catching flame. "R," she echoed softly, letting it linger. They didn't speak again immediately. Words were unnecessary. Presence had weight enough. The garden, alive and humming, held them in quiet communion, each aware of the other in ways deeper than casual conversation, as though the soil itself had taught them how to feel before they could speak. And for the first time, both allowed themselves to imagine a tomorrow in which this quiet, tender connection could grow, one glance, one touch, one shared moment at a time. Chapter 19. Names Spoken. The morning sun had climbed higher, scattering warmth over the garden. Amara lingered at the railing, reluctant to step fully into the space, but unable to resist the pull that had been building for weeks. Rux was already at the flower beds, hands brushing soil, adjusting leaves, humming softly under her breath. The faint scent of sandalwood mingled with the earthy perfume of the garden, wrapping around the quiet tension between them. Amara stepped forward, letting her gaze sweep over the garden and Rux. Honey-blonde hair glinting in sunlight, sea-blue eyes catching hers, the strength in those arms made tangible in the way she moved. Her pulse quickened, heartbeat echoing the slow, deliberate rhythm of presence. Amara began, almost shyly, stepping closer. What does R stand for? Rux blinked, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She straightened, dusting her gloves off. Roxandra, she said simply, letting the name roll off her tongue like sunlight over soil. And you? Amara, she replied softly, voice low, catching the faint shimmer in Rux's eyes. They hesitated, then Rux extended her hand, dusted but firm. Amara, she repeated, letting the name anchor her. Nice to meet you, properly. Amara lifted her hand, fingers brushing the warm, strong grip of Rux's. The handshake was electric, subtle, a current running up her arm and settling deep in her chest. The garden around them seemed to hum, leaves shivering slightly as though acknowledging the moment. Rux released her hand, brushing a strand of honey-blonde hair from her face, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. I hope I didn't overstep, she said softly, voice catching in that low, melodic cadence Amara had been replaying in her mind. The garden, it was, begging me to help. Amara's lips curved in a small, private smile. It looks alive. Better than it ever did. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried all the weight of admiration and unspoken acknowledgement. Rux stepped back slightly, though her eyes never left Amara's. I didn't expect to meet you like this, she admitted, a faint laugh threading through her tone. Honestly, I didn't expect you at all. Amara's chest tightened, heartbeat quickening again. Neither did I, she whispered, letting herself linger in the gaze of the woman before her. The pull between them was undeniable now, electric, quiet, and insistent. They stood for a long moment, the handshake lingering in memory rather than touch, the garden alive with their presence, their silence saying more than words could. The plants leaned toward them both, the ivy stretching, marigolds brightening, silent witnesses to the spark that had ignited and refused to be ignored. Finally, Amara exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath. Thank you for helping. Rux smiled softly, tilting her head, sea-blue eyes warm and alive. Anytime, Amara. And in that quiet exchange, with names spoken, hands brushed, and presence fully acknowledged, the pull between them became a force neither could resist, electric, undeniable, and only just beginning. Chapter 20, Aftermath. The garden was quiet again, the sunlight spilling golden across the flower beds and stone path. Amara lingered at the door, barely daring to breathe, as the memory of Rux's hand brushed against hers replayed in her chest. The warmth, the strength, the subtle thrill that had shot from her fingers straight to her pulse. She pressed a hand to her heart, feeling it pounded an echo of the electric connection, and let her eyes drift to the marigolds, the ivy, the soil, all witnesses to the brief, fleeting touch. Her mind traced the sensation over and over, Rux's palm firm yet gentle, the brush of her fingers in the handshake, the subtle pressure that lingered in memory longer than it should have. And that scent, the earthy mix of soil, sun-warmed leaves, and sandalwood wrapped around her like a promise she didn't know she could hope for. Amara closed her eyes, letting herself imagine Rux kneeling in the garden again, honey-blonde hair catching sunlight, sea-blue eyes glancing up at her, lips curling in that subtle smile. She shivered, chest tightening, pulse racing. Desire, curiosity, and a soft, aching longing threaded together, impossible to untangle. Rux, meanwhile, sat in her truck a few streets away, hands resting lightly on the wheel, eyes unfocused on the road. Her mind replayed the encounter over and over, the way Amara's hazel eyes had met hers, the subtle warmth radiating from her presence, the firmness of her fingers in the handshake. Strong, elegant, careful. She exhaled slowly, the scent of the garden still clinging faintly to her clothes and hair, mingling with the warmth of her skin. She could feel it, the pull, the quiet tug toward someone she barely knew, yet already mattered. Rux's lips curved in a faint, private smile. She had not expected to feel this. The careful self-discipline she had built over years whispered caution. Yet, the spark in that brief touch, the electricity that had threaded between their hands and lingered in the air, refused to be ignored. Tomorrow, she thought, heartbeat settling into a slow, steady rhythm, I will see her again. Both Amara and Rux sat with the echoes of that brief connection, fingers, eyes, presence, and scent intertwining into a memory that demanded attention. The garden hummed softly in both of their minds, alive with unspoken acknowledgement, waiting for the next step. Desire had been ignited, subtle but undeniable, and neither could retreat fully from the pull it had created. Chapter 21. The Awkward Dance. The morning was warmer now, sunlight spilling across the garden like molten gold. Amara stepped outside, careful, almost tentative, coffee still warm in her hand. She had told herself she would keep her distance, that she wouldn't let curiosity or longing overpower restraint. But the garden had other plans. Rux knelt among the marigolds, gloves dusted with soil, sleeves rolled, honey blonde hair catching the sun. Sea blue eyes lifted as Amara's gaze fell, and the tension was immediate, tangible, crackling like static in the air. Morning, Amara said softly, taking a hesitant step forward. Morning, Rux replied, voice low, casual, but threaded with a faint humor, a teasing lift in the corners of her lips. She straightened slightly, brushing soil from her gloves. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Amara shook her head, chest tightening. No, not at all. Her words were careful, measured, but her eyes betrayed the pulse of curiosity and something deeper. They lingered in silence, both aware of the space between them, the warmth of the sun, the subtle hum of life around them. The plants swayed slightly as if leaning closer, attentive to the tension that wove through the air. Rux gestured toward the marigolds. They seem to need a little encouragement this morning. I hope you don't mind. Amara's lips curved. They look happy, healthier than I've ever seen them. Her voice softened, admiration threading through the words. You have a way with them. Rux's fingers brushed lightly over the top of a flower, careful not to touch Amara, yet somehow the gesture spoke. They don't lie. You can't trick them. They respond to care and attention. Her eyes flicked to Amara, just briefly, a silent question lingering there. Amara felt the pull, the undeniable tug of presence. Like people, she murmured, almost to herself. Sometimes, Rux admitted, a faint laugh escaping, soft, melodic. Some people need more patience. And some, they surprise you. Her gaze lingered on Amara, unguarded, curious, and warm. They laughed softly at the shared tension, the words barely bridging the distance, yet threading intimacy through the awkwardness. Amara took a careful step closer, inhaling the faint scent of sandalwood and soil that clung to Rux, and for a heartbeat, the world contracted to the space between them. Rux straightened, hands brushing soil from her sleeves, a small blush touching her cheeks. I should finish this corner. But I could use your opinion. She nodded toward a bed of marigolds, subtle, inviting, but careful not to overstep. Amara's pulse quickened. I'd like that. Her voice was soft, but certain, a quiet acknowledgement of the connection they were beginning to explore. And for the first time in weeks, the garden was not only alive with plants, it was alive with presence, care, tension, and an electric anticipation neither could deny. Chapter 22. Brushed Hands. Amara knelt at the edge of the marigold bed, gently untangling a few stubborn vines. The sun was warm on her back, and the faint scent of earth and sandalwood from Rux drifted around her, curling into her senses like a whispered invitation. Rux crouched nearby, pruning a small rose bush, hands careful and deliberate. Her hair fell into her face, but she brushed it away absent-mindedly, eyes glinting as they followed Amara's careful movements. A stray vine had resisted both their efforts. As Amara reached for it, her hand brushed against Rux's fingers. Electric. Unavoidable. Warm. Sorry, Amara whispered, pulling back, heart pounding. Rux's lips curved, soft, teasing, though her voice remained calm. It's okay, she said. The plants are begging. We're just helping them. Amara swallowed, feeling heat rise to her cheeks, and offered a small, tentative smile. I've never noticed the way plants respond before. Her voice was low, almost confessional, eyes glancing at Rux, but not quite meeting hers. Rux's eyes softened, and she shifted slightly closer, not enough to be overt, just enough that their shoulders almost touched. They respond to care, she murmured. Like people. They notice attention, patience, even kindness. Her voice lingered, gentle but pointed, teasing the edges of the silence between them. Amara felt the pull, the subtle brush of Rux's shoulder, the warmth of her presence, the lingering smell of sandalwood and soil mingling with the faint morning air. She exhaled slowly, letting herself lean into the sensation, daring to acknowledge the craving she had been holding back for weeks. Rux noticed the subtle shift, a quick inhale, the faint brush of fingers along a vine. She smiled softly, almost imperceptibly, and returned her attention to the garden, giving Amara space while savoring proximity. Minutes passed in quiet work, hands occasionally brushing again, hearts skipping beats in tandem. The garden hummed around them, alive with growth, sun, and a quiet intimacy neither needed to speak aloud. Finally, Amara stepped back, brushing soil from her palms. It looks better than I imagined, she said, voice soft but proud. Rux nodded, a small, genuine smile lifting her lips. We make a good team, she said, tone playful, eyes sparkling. Even if we're still learning each other's rhythms. Amara's pulse quickened at the phrase. I like that, she admitted, the warmth of connection threading through her chest, tangible and undeniable. They stood there a moment longer, shoulders almost touching, hands still tingling from contact, breathing in the sense of earth, sun, and each other, no words needed, the garden itself speaking in their stead. And for the first time, both understood that this quiet, tactile, electric collaboration was only the beginning. Chapter 23. The Ripples. At La Hoverie Landscaping Headquarters, Alina glanced up from her desk, watching her younger sister navigate the open floor with quiet grace. Rux's hands were dusted with soil, even after wiping them clean, her honey-blonde hair falling in effortless strands around her face. But there was something different today, a lightness in her step, a spark in her sea-blue eyes that hadn't been there before. Rux, Alina said casually, you're smiling to yourself again. New clients. Rux waved a hand, brushing off the comment with practiced ease. Just new plants and a couple of projects, she muttered, voice low, avoiding eye contact. Nothing to worry about. Alina raised a brow but didn't press. She had learned long ago that pushing Rux only caused her to retreat. Yet, as she watched her sister, she couldn't help but notice the subtle shift, the way Rux paused mid-step to admire a potted plant, the faint curl of a smile at something only she seemed to see, the warmth in her movements that hadn't been there before. Something's happening, Alina thought quietly. And though Rux wouldn't admit it, Alina knew. She always knew when Rux's heart had taken a quiet, clandestine turn. Meanwhile, across town, Amara sat in her sleek London office, the hum of computers and soft chatter of colleagues filling the space. Her assistant, ever observant, had caught her more than once gazing out the window with a soft, almost dreamy expression, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Amara, the assistant ventured lightly during a brief pause in the morning meetings. Are you okay? You seem happy. Amara blinked, caught mid-thought, and quickly refocused on the screen in front of her. Yes, just thinking, she replied, voice steady, though her cheeks warmed slightly. She pressed her lips together to stop the lingering smile, but it remained stubbornly, softly, like a shadow of something stirring inside. Back in the garden earlier that week, the subtle glances, the brushes of hands, the hum of conversation with Rux had planted seeds in her chest, seeds that now bloomed quietly even as she buried herself in work. The presence, the strength, the careful attention of Rux, everything about her lingered in Amara's thoughts, coloring her days with warmth she hadn't known she could feel. Alina watched Rux glide past again, a faint hum escaping her lips, and thought to herself, "It's something I've never seen before." And somewhere, across the city, Amara allowed herself to exhale, letting the soft smile remain just a little longer, not fully aware yet of how inescapable this pull was becoming. Chapter 24. Worlds Collide. Amara's office hummed with activity, the afternoon sunlight spilling across polished surfaces. She was reviewing contracts when her largest client, Mr. Dalton, stepped into the room, his energy almost as big as his voice. "Amara," he boomed, extending a hand in excitement. "You must meet the woman behind this landscaping company. Absolutely phenomenal work. I've never seen such attention to detail, care for the property. She's a magician." Amara blinked, tilting her head slightly, the hint of curiosity stirring in her chest. "Oh," she murmured, feigning casual interest, though her mind raced. "I would love to meet her." Meanwhile, Rux was arranging tools in her truck, preparing for the next client site, unaware that the address she had been given was Amara's company headquarters. She had no idea that the woman from the garden, quiet, intense, unforgettable, was her next stop. Back in the office, Amara smiled faintly, brushing a strand of black hair from her face, hazel eyes alight with a mix of anticipation and unspoken thrill. She followed Mr. Dalton down the corridor, curiosity sharpening every sense. The door opened, and there she was, Rux. Honey blonde hair tucked neatly behind her ears, sea blue eyes catching the sunlight that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The same hands that had coaxed life from the garden now gestured confidently toward the office layout, gloves swapped for clean hands and professional poise. For a heartbeat, time froze. Recognition hit simultaneously, but silently. Neither spoke immediately. The memory of hands brushing in the garden, the scent of earth and sandalwood, the pull of presence, all surged between them. Roxandra," Amara whispered under her breath, heart racing. "Amara," Rux replied, voice quiet, measured, eyes scanning the office before landing fully on Amara. A faint smile tugged at her lips, a mix of surprise and restrained delight. Mr. Dalton, oblivious to the silent electricity between the two, continued, "She's remarkable. I insisted she handle my projects personally. Amara, you simply must see her vision for yourself." Rux chuckled softly, an almost musical sound, still absorbing the fact that her next client, the project she was about to lead, was the woman she had been thinking of for weeks. She stepped forward, extending her hand instinctively. "I'll take good care of your property," she said, subtly nodding toward Amara. Amara reached out, brushing her fingers against Rux's palm in a handshake that was now more than accidental. It was deliberate, electric, and impossible to ignore. Sparks danced in the air, a quiet acknowledgement of the connection threading through months of stolen glances, shared presence, and unspoken longing. "Welcome," Amara said softly, voice low, intimate, though the office buzz continued around them. Rux's smile deepened, a flicker of amusement and tenderness in her sea blue eyes. "It's good to see you again, Amara." The collision of their worlds, accidental yet fated, left both women acutely aware of the pull, the unspoken understanding, and the undeniable chemistry that neither could deny any longer. Chapter 25. Light of Day. The project had begun with spreadsheets, site maps, and careful planning, but it quickly evolved into something far more personal. Amara followed Rux through the property, clipboard in hand, watching the subtle way she directed her team. Every instruction was precise, every movement purposeful, yet threaded with an ease that made her confidence contagious. Honey blonde hair caught the afternoon sun as Rux crouched to examine a plant, hands brushing lightly against the earth. Amara felt it again, The same thrill she had in the garden weeks ago, the spark of electricity when hands brushed, the pull of presence she could no longer deny. But now it wasn't just physical. It was intellectual. Observing Rux navigate problems, anticipate obstacles, and care for every detail, Amara realized something undeniable. The care she had seen in the garden was no fluke. This woman brought it to everything she did. "She's brilliant," Amara whispered under her breath, glancing at Rux. Hazel eyes tracing the curve of her shoulders, the deliberate attention in her sea blue gaze. "And caring," she added softly, heart beating faster. Rux looked up, catching the words, though Amara hadn't meant them to reach her. Eyebrows rose slightly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Caring matters," she said quietly, voice low, eyes meeting Amara's. "Whether it's plants, projects, people." Amara felt her chest tighten. Every careful attempt to keep her feelings in check now seemed absurd. The admiration, the attraction, the undeniable pull, they were all there, climbing out of the shadows and into the light of day. She exhaled slowly, trying to focus on the clipboard, on the details, anything to anchor herself. But Rux's presence, her warmth, the subtle scent of sandalwood lingering even in the office air, made concentration impossible. "And you're remarkable," Amara added, almost involuntarily, letting the words slip through before she could stop them. Rux's smile deepened, a soft, knowing curve. "I could say the same about you," she replied, tone intimate yet restrained, leaving the words hanging between them like a delicate bridge. Amara's pulse quickened. The light had been let in, and there was no hiding now. Not from Rux. Not from herself. The feelings that had simmered quietly, secretly, were alive, undeniable, and demanding attention. The office, the project, the plants, they all became secondary to the connection pulsing between them, a current neither could ignore. And as they worked side by side, hands occasionally brushing, eyes meeting with unspoken understanding, Amara realized one truth: this was no longer a secret. The heart always finds its way to daylight. Chapter 26: Shared Worlds. The sunlight poured through the office windows, warm and golden, but it felt nothing compared to the heat rising in Amara's chest. She watched Rux speak, every word deliberate, yet soft, and realized it wasn't the story of the company that captivated her, it was the soul behind it. Rux's hands rested lightly on her lap, the same hands that had coaxed life from Amara's garden, hands that had brushed hers once or twice too many times to ignore. Her voice carried a quiet pride, not loud, not boastful, just truth. "I built my company from the ground up," Rux murmured, eyes tracing a memory in the room as if the office itself could understand. "I'm not a boardroom person, leave that to my sister. I just give myself to the work, to the details, to the life I can touch." Amara felt herself leaning closer, drawn in by the rhythm of her words, the warmth behind them. Her own chest tightened, not from admiration, though that was there, but from recognition. The same care, the same attention she stifled behind spreadsheets and schedules was alive in Rux without apology. "It shows," Amara breathed, her voice low, almost afraid to break the spell. "Everything you touch, it's alive." Rux's sea blue eyes lifted, soft and steady, holding her gaze just long enough for the words to sink, for the pull to deepen. "Most people don't see the effort behind it," she said, almost shyly. "They don't notice the hours, the patience, the love." Amara's heart clenched at the confession, because she knew that ache, the quiet fire that goes unseen, the care that never gets recognized. "I know," she whispered, a tremor threading through her words. "I hide behind structure, schedules, expectations, but I care. Deeply. I always do." Rux's lips curved in a small, private smile, the kind that could hold entire worlds. "I see it," she murmured. "Even in the small moments, the pauses, the consideration. You don't hide it as much as you think." The air between them thickened, charged with something tender, something that had been simmering in the garden, in brushes of hands, in glances that lingered too long. Amara's pulse raced, her chest tightening, warmth spilling over her ribs like sunlight. She wanted to reach out, to touch, to anchor herself to this, to Rux. I never expected to find someone who notices, Amara confessed, voice breaking softly, her hazel eyes flicking down for a heartbeat before meeting Rux's again. I've noticed, Rux replied, gentle, unwavering, letting the words hang heavy in the space between them. Since the garden. Since the very first day. Time seemed to stretch. The office around them blurred into nothing, the sunlight golden and soft. They were two people who had been holding themselves back, threading care and attention into everything around them, now finally letting themselves be seen. Rux shifted slightly, close enough for Amara to feel the warmth radiating from her, careful not to overstep. We are more alike than I realized, Rux said softly, a teasing undertone hiding in the sincerity, like sunlight under clouds. Amara smiled, a little breathless, her lips curving naturally despite herself. Seems so, she admitted, voice trembling in the most delicious way. It's nice, talking like this. Honestly. No pretenses. Just us. Rux's gaze softened, and she nodded, the subtle warmth in her sea-blue eyes impossible to ignore. Yes, just us, she echoed. And for the first time that day, both women let the quiet, tender electricity settle between them, not rushed, not forced, but undeniable. Their worlds had collided, yes, but it was the recognition, the shared vulnerability, and the warmth threading through their hearts that made this moment burn so brightly. Chapter 27. Strolling Shadows. The afternoon air was warm but not heavy, carrying the subtle scent of earth and sun from the gardens Rux had tended earlier. Amara walked slowly along the tree-lined path behind the office, hands tucked lightly into her coat pockets. She told herself she was enjoying the day, the quiet, the air, but her eyes kept flicking to Rux. Rux moved beside her, not too close, careful to give space yet always within the periphery of Amara's vision. Honey blonde hair caught in the sunlight, sea-blue eyes scanning the path and occasionally glancing at Amara, noting the gentle curve of her shoulders, the way she walked with careful grace. Neither spoke immediately. Words weren't necessary. Every glance, every shift of weight, every subtle breath carried unspoken conversations. Amara's mind raced. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the invisible gap, to close the distance between them. Yet fear clung tightly to her ribs. Reese's voice echoed faintly in her memory, sharp and cruel. You'll be alone. No one will love you. She shivered, telling herself to hold back, to protect herself, to not ruin whatever fragile thread was forming. Rux sensed it, of course. A subtle hesitation, a soft tension in the line of Amara's shoulders, the way her eyes would dart away and then return. But Rux didn't push. Instead, she walked beside her, steady, patient, present. She let her presence speak louder than words, showing up every time, always near enough to be felt, yet giving Amara room to breathe. The breeze shifted, carrying the faint scent of sandalwood from Rux, mingling with the warm, earthy smell of the path. Amara's chest tightened again, her pulse catching in a rhythm she had long forgotten. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words faltered. You watch carefully, Amara murmured at last, almost shyly, as if admitting it aloud might break the spell. Rux's lips curved into the tiniest smile, playful but knowing. I notice, she said quietly, letting the words hang in the golden light. Some things are worth noticing. Amara swallowed, cheeks warming. And me, she whispered, almost breathless. Rux didn't answer in words. She just stayed beside her, step for step, shoulder occasionally brushing ever so slightly against hers, presence steady, warm, and patient. It was enough, for now, to let Amara feel seen without the fear of being pushed away. They walked on, side by side, hearts beating in quiet harmony. Every glance, every subtle shift of movement, every faint laugh that slipped between them built a language of its own. Words were unnecessary. The space between them spoke volumes. Amara's walls, built over years of caution, trembled softly. She wasn't ready to fall completely, not yet, but for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the pull, the warmth, the possibility. And Rux. Rux was there, steady as the earth beneath their feet, letting her heart unfold at its own pace. Chapter 28. A Brush of Hands. The path curved gently around a small fountain, water tinkling softly in the sunlight. Amara and Rux strolled side by side, quiet and comfortable in the shared rhythm, each step measured, hearts tuned to the subtle cadence of the other. Amara bent slightly to examine a small flower sprouting near the fountain's edge. Rux stepped forward at the same moment, reaching for the same plant, and their fingers brushed. Electric. A spark ran up Amara's arm, warm and sharp all at once. She froze for a heartbeat, holding her breath. The faint scent of sandalwood and sun-dried soil clung to Rux, curling around her senses. Rux's eyes met hers, sea blue, steady yet teasing, a silent acknowledgement of the small collision. She didn't pull away immediately, letting the moment linger just long enough for Amara to feel it in every nerve. I'm sorry, Amara murmured, though her voice trembled slightly. Rux smiled softly, a quiet, intimate curve of lips. It's okay, she said. It seems the plants are encouraging closeness today. Her tone was playful but gentle, a teasing edge that melted some of Amara's hesitation. Amara laughed softly, a warm, shy sound that seemed to surprise her even as it escaped. Maybe they know what I've been afraid to admit, she whispered, eyes flicking down at their almost touching hands. They continued walking, fingers occasionally brushing again, accidental yet deliberate enough to keep the tension alive. Every subtle contact made Amara's pulse quicken. Every glance from Rux felt like a quiet promise, a gentle pull she could no longer ignore. At the fountain, Rux bent to adjust a small flower, and Amara found herself watching, not the plant, but the woman tending it. The curve of her shoulders, the tilt of her head, the quiet concentration, and the way Rux's presence seemed to pull warmth into the very air around them. Amara's chest tightened. She wanted to reach out, to let her hand linger just a little longer, but fear whispered insistently. You'll push her away. You can't risk it. Rux sensed it, of course. The hesitation, the quiet pull of desire tempered by caution. She didn't speak of it. She simply remained, showing up, staying near, letting Amara feel the connection without forcing it. The water tinkled between them, sunlight scattering diamonds across the path. And in that quiet, shared space, the first spark of physical intimacy, small, fleeting, electric, had been lit. A brush of hands, a heartbeat shared, a laugh exchanged. It was enough to leave both women breathless, aware, and more tangled in the pull of each other than they had been all along. Chapter 29. A Hand Taken. The path stretched ahead, dappled with sunlight and shadows. Amara walked beside Rux, their conversation light, easy, a playful banter that made Amara's chest lift in ways she hadn't felt in years. Then, without warning and without hesitation, Rux reached out and took her hand. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't shy. It was deliberate, steady, as if it had always belonged there. The warmth of Rux's hand wrapped around hers, grounding her, steadying her, igniting a spark that raced from fingertips to heart. Amara froze. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause, the distant laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, even the faint hum of traffic faded into a soft, golden hush. She didn't pull away. She couldn't. She felt the gentle pressure, the quiet insistence, and a strange, intoxicating strength in Rux she had not realized she was craving. Rux's stride never faltered. Her fingers laced with Amara's as naturally as breathing, guiding, steadying, protective. Her voice, calm and teasing, reached Amara over the soft rhythm of their steps. You look like you're holding back, Rux said, eyes glinting with humor and something deeper. Amara's chest rose and fell rapidly, her mind a jumble of warning and surrender. She opened her mouth, words failing. Instead, her grip tightened slightly, letting herself be anchored by this unexpected courage, this quiet certainty in Rux. I wasn't expecting that, Amara whispered finally, voice trembling, a mixture of awe and fear. Rux smiled softly, glancing down at their joined hands. I know, she murmured, voice warm and unwavering. You didn't have to. But I'm here. The words were simple, but they carried weight that pressed against Amara's chest like sunlight through clouds. She realized, with a flicker of awe, that she had been craving exactly this, someone who saw her hesitation and still reached out, who offered strength without demanding surrender. For the first time, Amara allowed herself to feel it fully. The pull, the warmth, the quiet reassurance that she could trust herself to let it happen. She didn't need to speak. She didn't need to plan. She only needed to walk, hand in hand, heart pounding, letting the silence between them speak more than any words ever could. And Rux. Rux walked beside her, steady, patient, intentional, every step reinforcing the unspoken promise. She would be there every time Amara allowed herself to reach. Chapter 30. Letting Go. They found a shaded bench tucked beneath a flowering tree, sunlight filtering through petals and leaves, scattering dappled gold across the path. Amara sank onto it, letting the tension in her shoulders dissolve ever so slightly. Rux lowered herself beside her, careful to give space, yet their hands remained intertwined, fingers laced naturally. The warmth radiating through the connection was steady, unhurried, unlike anything Amara had felt since Reese. For a long moment, they simply sat. No words. No expectations. Only presence. Amara's breath slowed. She felt the pulse of Rux's hand against hers, the reassuring weight, the subtle squeeze that said without speaking, I am here. You are safe. You do not need to run. She let herself notice the little things, Rux's honey blonde hair catching sunlight, the faint scent of sandalwood mingled with soil, the gentle curve of her smile even in silence. Rux's care for the world, the gardens, the plants, the details, was now flowing into this moment, flowing into Amara. Patient. Present. Intentional. Amara realized she didn't need to fix anything, didn't need to anticipate or control. Rux wasn't pushing her. She wasn't rushing her. She was simply there, allowing Amara to meet her halfway, to trust, to feel, to be. A laugh escaped Amara, soft and unrestrained, startling even her. I didn't think I could feel like this again, she whispered, voice trembling with awe and relief. After everything. Rux tilted her head, sea blue eyes gentle and unwavering. Then don't think, she said softly, voice carrying warmth, patience, and subtle invitation. Just be here. Amara exhaled, letting herself sink further into the moment. For the first time since Reese left, she felt the past loosen its grip. The shadow of loneliness and fear, the echoes of harsh words, the weight of regret all softened. She could let herself feel something pure, quiet, and wholly present. She leaned slightly closer, almost imperceptibly, and Rux adjusted only by the smallest fraction, letting her, steady as the earth beneath them. Amara's heart lifted. She realized, with a quiet wonder, that she had been craving exactly this: patience, care, and the permission to trust, to want, to let go. And in that golden, silent moment, she let the past slip just enough to make room for Rux, steady, gentle, grounding, and more alive than she had dared imagine. It was simple. It was intimate. It was real. And Amara knew, finally, that she could allow herself to love again, not recklessly, not fearfully, but fully and on her own terms. Chapter 31. The First Gentle Stir. The garden was quiet now, bathed in late afternoon light. Amara and Rux had moved closer to the flower beds, crouching to examine a patch of newly blooming marigolds. The scent of earth and sunlight clung to them, mingling with the faint sandalwood drifting from Rux. Amara's hand brushed a petal as she leaned forward, and Rux's fingers, almost instinctively, touched hers again, light, grazing, deliberate yet gentle. A small thrill ran through Amara, a current she could not ignore. She froze for a heartbeat, then let herself smile, daring to let her fingers linger a fraction longer. "You're very careful," Rux murmured, a teasing lilt in her voice, eyes scanning Amara's expression. "With the flowers, with your hands, with me." Amara's cheeks warmed, a soft laugh escaping. Careful, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to ruin anything. Rux's sea blue eyes softened. Then don't, she said simply, her own fingers brushing Amara's again. Just enjoy it. Amara exhaled, letting herself relax. She noticed the warmth of Rux's hand lingering against hers, the quiet steadiness that seemed to anchor her heartbeat. For the first time in years, she felt desire without fear, curiosity without judgment. Their hands moved almost naturally now, fingertips tracing lightly over petals, occasionally brushing against each other. Amara caught herself leaning closer, drawn by more than just the flowers, the scent, the warmth, the quiet patience that radiated from Rux like sunlight through leaves. You always know how to make things grow, Amara whispered, voice trembling with awe and something else, something deeper, unspoken. Rux smiled softly, tilting her head so the sunlight kissed her features. Not always, she said gently. But I try. And some things, they just respond. Her gaze flicked to Amara, quiet, steady, and undeniably intimate. Like you. Amara's breath caught. A current ran through her chest, the slow burn of longing entwined with comfort and safety. She wanted to close the gap, to feel Rux closer, yet fear still lingered at the edges. But in this moment, with hands brushing, laughter shared, and hearts daring to beat in quiet rhythm together, she realized she didn't need to fight it. Rux didn't push, didn't demand. She simply stayed, presence unwavering, offering small sparks, teasing touches, and a quiet invitation to explore. And Amara finally allowed herself to lean into it. The garden, the flowers, the sunlight, all of it became a stage for a slow awakening. A touch here, a brush there, a shared laugh that lingered longer than necessary. Desire, curiosity, and trust intertwined, electric but tender, and for the first time, Amara felt the delicious possibility of letting herself want, without fear, without guilt. Chapter 32. A fall into each other. The garden hummed with life, sunlight spilling across marigolds, roses, and the still unruly edges of Amara's overgrown backyard. They were crouched side by side, pruning, planting, hands brushing more often than necessary, laughter spilling between them like warm water. Amara reached a little too far for a stubborn branch, leaning beyond her balance. The world tilted, and suddenly she was falling, heart leaping, arms flailing. Before she could even gasp, strong hands closed around her waist. Rux's arms were steady, unwavering, holding her up as if she weighed nothing at all. Their bodies pressed together briefly, hearts hammering in mirrored rhythm. Amara's breath hitched. She froze, caught in that suspended moment. Her hazel eyes lifted to meet Rux's sea blue ones, wide, steady, and piercing straight into the part of her she had kept locked for years. Are you okay? Rux whispered, voice low and tender, a teasing undertone hiding beneath the concern. Amara could barely speak, lips trembling, chest tight with exhilaration and desire. She nodded, but the world seemed to have shrunk to the space between them, the brush of Rux's hands on her waist, the warmth radiating from her body, the faint scent of sandalwood and sun-warmed earth surrounding them. Time slowed. The garden, the sunlight, the flowers, they all faded until there was only Rux. And Amara found herself leaning in, drawn by an irresistible gravity. Rux didn't pull away. Instead, she lowered her face toward Amara's, eyes locking in a silent question and permission all at once. Amara's lips met hers in a kiss that was at once tender, hungry, and electric. Fingers tangled lightly in hair, hands pressing closer, breaths mingling with the scent of earth and flowers, the sunlight warm on their skin. It was everything Amara had denied herself for years, soft, grounding, and infinitely alive. When they finally parted, just lightly, their foreheads rested together, hearts still hammering, breaths mingling. Amara felt a tremor of exhilaration, the thrill of surrender, and the strange, wondrous realization that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Rux's lips curved into the faintest, private smile, fingers brushing the side of Amara's face. "I've been waiting for you to let yourself fall," she murmured, voice warm, teasing, and intimate all at once. Amara exhaled, finally letting herself fully relax, letting the past fade entirely, letting the moment and Rux hold her completely. I think I've been waiting too, she whispered, voice trembling in the best way, heart open and unguarded. And in the golden garden, surrounded by growing things, they kissed again, this time with no hesitation, only the joy of discovery, closeness, and a love that had been patiently, quietly waiting for them both. Chapter 33. In the moment. The garden held its quiet around them, sunlight spilling through leaves, brushing across hair and shoulders. Amara's hand still rested lightly in Rux's, the warmth lingering like a pulse she could feel in her chest. Their lips met again, slowly this time, no urgency, no need to rush. Just the soft press of mouth against mouth, the gentle tilting, the subtle shift of bodies leaning closer. Breath mingled, hearts sinking without effort, and Amara felt herself dissolve into the steady, quiet strength of Rux. There were no words. There were no declarations. Just the slow, deliberate unfolding of connection, a gentle surrender she had never dared to give before. In Rux's kiss, she discovered something she hadn't even known she had been searching for, a steadiness, a patience, a quiet certainty that anchored her completely. Rux didn't speak, didn't move too quickly. She simply held her, letting the moment stretch, letting Amara feel it fully, letting her find the space to trust, to lean in, to be. Amara's eyes closed for a heartbeat, then opened, taking in the sea-blue gaze of Rux. She realized, suddenly, that this silent, steady presence was exactly what she had always wanted. She had spent years trying to fill a void, fighting ghosts of the past, and here it was, a heart she could lean into, a presence that didn't demand, didn't judge, didn't push. Slowly, imperceptibly, their bodies shifted closer, tilting toward each other, not in haste but in ease, in rhythm. Two halves moving, finding a hole they hadn't realized was missing. Amara exhaled softly, letting herself exist fully in Rux's arms. Her past, her fears, her regrets, they melted into the golden warmth of the garden and the steady, grounding force of Rux. And there they remained, not needing words, not needing motion, not needing anything but each other. Two hearts aligned, two souls quietly claiming the space they had always been searching for. The garden hummed around them. The sun filtered through leaves, and Amara finally understood. She had found what she never knew she needed, but had always wanted. Chapter 34. Home in her arms. The room was dim, soft shadows stretching across the walls as the late afternoon sun slipped away. Amara's pulse had never felt so alive, her mind a quiet storm of anticipation and surrender. She had thought the kiss was perfect, a moment of revelation, but she hadn't yet known the depth of Rux. Rux's hands moved over her with reverence, steady and deliberate, every touch measured, patient, attuned to Amara's rhythm. There was no rush, no urgency, only presence, the kind of presence that whispered, "I am here. I am yours. You're safe." Amara trembled at the brush of fingertips, the quiet murmur of breath against her skin. Every kiss, every gentle caress, felt like a grounding force, tethering her to something she had been searching for without knowing it. You're, Amara whispered, voice barely audible, lost in the warmth and closeness. Rux pressed her forehead to Amara's, letting the silence answer, letting the steady pressure of her hands and the warmth of her body speak louder than words. "I'm here," she said finally, voice low, intimate, unshakable. The moment stretched, slow and languid, every heartbeat a note in a symphony of touch. Amara felt herself giving in, not just to desire, but to trust, to surrender, to the astonishing clarity that this Rux, this patient, steady, gentle force, was what she had always needed. Every kiss, every gentle movement, every shared breath told her a truth she hadn't known she could hold. Home was not a place. Home was a person. And Rux was that person. Amara closed her eyes, letting herself melt into the warmth, into the steadiness, into the unwavering attention that Rux offered without hesitation. Her past fears, her memories of absence, even the sharp echoes of Reese's cruelty, they faded into the background. Here, now, she could simply be. And in that slow, deliberate, tender intimacy, she realized that this quiet, patient, and all-encompassing presence was more than desire. It was belonging. It was trust. It was the home she had spent a lifetime seeking, finally found in the arms of Rux. The world outside ceased to matter. There was only the gentle hum of connection, the warmth of bodies, the slow cadence of hearts finally aligned, and the sweet, undeniable knowledge that this was love realized, steady, patient, and infinitely tender. Chapter 35. Morning in her arms. Sunlight spilled softly through the curtains, painting the room in gentle gold. Amara stirred, eyelids fluttering open, and realized she hadn't moved because she was held. Held in a way that made the world outside fade to nothing. Rux's arms were steady around her, a quiet, grounding presence that had been missing from Amara's life for far too long. She could feel the slow rise and fall of Rux's chest, the warmth of her body, the faint scent of sandalwood mingling with sun-warmed skin and earth. Amara exhaled slowly, letting herself sink further into the embrace, letting every worry, every shadow of the past drift away. Here, in this quiet morning, she had found her peace. Not in a place, not in a fleeting moment, but in the steady, patient presence of Rux. Her fingers traced idly along Rux's arm, memorizing the feel, the way her muscles moved beneath skin, the subtle strength that anchored her. She didn't want to speak. She didn't want to move. She simply wanted this, to stay here in her arms, suspended in the calm, warm certainty of belonging. Rux shifted slightly, nuzzling the side of Amara's head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. No words were needed. There never had to be. The quiet hum of the morning, the gentle press of bodies together, the steady rhythm of their shared breath, it said everything that mattered. Amara closed her eyes again, letting herself be fully present. Every heartbeat, every sigh, every small brush of touch reassured her. She was safe, she was wanted, she was home. And she didn't want it to end. Not ever. For the first time in years, Amara could simply exist, unguarded, unafraid, and utterly at peace. In Rux's arms, she had found everything she hadn't even known she was searching for. And she stayed there, letting the quiet stretch, letting the sun warm her skin, letting Rux's steady presence cradle her, grounding her, holding her whole. Chapter 36. Morning Rituals. The sunlight was brighter now, spilling fully into the kitchen, warming the tiles where Amara and Rux moved slowly, deliberately, side by side. Rux poured coffee with her usual quiet focus, hands brushing against Amara's as she handed the cup over, a small spark of electricity in the mundane. Amara sipped, eyes tracing the curve of Rux's shoulders, the honey gold hair catching the sun, the steady, grounded presence that made her heart unclench in ways it hadn't in years. "You make it strong," Amara murmured, a teasing lilt in her voice. "Like you." Rux glanced up, a faint, private smile tugging at her lips. "And you," she said softly, "need it that way." Her fingers grazed Amara's hand again, brief, deliberate, grounding. They moved through the morning like this, side by side, brushing against each other in the smallest ways, a shoulder here, a hand there, laughter spilling over burnt toast and spilled coffee. Amara realized, slowly, that every small gesture carried weight, tenderness, and the certainty of presence she had been craving without realizing it. Outside, the garden waited for them, alive and bright. They tended to it together, moving naturally, hands brushing over flowers and weeds, shared glances punctuated with soft smiles and quiet laughter. Amara reached for a stubborn branch and Rux's hand followed hers, steadying her, brushing gently over her fingers. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, no words were needed, just the hum of shared trust, shared space, and the subtle pulse of something deeper than desire. "You make it feel alive," Amara whispered, glancing around the garden, then back at Rux. "Everything, even this, feels better with you here." Rux's gaze softened, the familiar warmth in her eyes grounding Amara in ways she hadn't imagined. "I think it's always been here," Rux murmured. "It just needed the right hands, the right heart." They laughed softly, the sound low and intimate, as their movements continued, hands brushing, bodies occasionally touching, breaths mingling. No rush. No urgency. Just the slow, deliberate weaving of two lives into a shared rhythm, each finding home in the other. By the time they paused, leaning against each other beneath the garden arch, sunlight on their shoulders, they both knew that this quiet, shared presence, was the beginning of everything they had been searching for. Not fireworks, not grand gestures, just life unfolding slowly, gently, together. And for the first time in years, Amara felt completely, undeniably at home. Chapter 37, Evening Whispers. The garden had quieted, night settling softly over the house. The air was cooler now, scented with earth, flowers, and the faint trace of sandalwood that clung to Rux. Amara stepped barefoot onto the patio, watching her move with ease among the twilight shadows, fingers brushing petals, humming softly to the plants as she had that first morning. Amara's chest tightened in anticipation, a delicious tension she no longer fought. She stepped closer, the faint rustle of leaves announcing her presence. Rux turned, catching her gaze, and a slow, playful smile tugged at her lips. "You're following me," Rux teased lightly, her voice low, intimate. I just..." Amara's voice faltered, but she let herself come nearer. "I wanted to be here. With you." Rux tilted her head, sea-blue eyes catching the fading sunlight, steady and unyielding. "Then stay," she said softly, and Amara did, letting the words settle around her like a warm cloak. Their hands brushed, fingers grazing, lingering just long enough to send shivers up Amara's spine. A laugh slipped from her lips, quiet and breathless, and Rux mirrored it, soft and teasing. The space between them shrank almost imperceptibly until their shoulders touched, then their arms, until Amara realized her hand had found Rux's. No words were needed. Every glance, every gentle brush of skin, every lingering touch spoke louder than language. Amara's pulse raced, her breath quickened, yet the steady presence of Rux grounded her, letting her savor every sensation. You feel like," Amara started, then faltered, caught in the intimacy, the desire, the quiet care radiating from Rux. "I know," Rux murmured, leaning slightly closer, their foreheads almost touching. "I feel it too. And it's perfect." Amara let herself melt into the space, letting Rux's hand guide hers along the curve of an arm, the soft press of a shoulder. A shiver, a laugh, a sigh, all soft, unhurried, intimate. Rux's presence was patient, allowing Amara to explore, to lean in, to trust without fear. And slowly, naturally, Amara felt herself responding, leaning into Rux's warmth, letting desire mingle with comfort, trust, and the undeniable knowledge that she had finally found something steady, safe, and wholly irresistible. They stayed there in the garden, twilight surrounding them, hands entwined, bodies brushing, hearts sinking in a rhythm all their own. Soft touches became whispers of intent, lingering glances became promises, and every small movement deepened the intimacy between them. In that quiet, teasing, tender space, Amara finally understood. Rux wasn't just desire, wasn't just attraction, she was home. And home felt like this, steady, patient, grounding, and entirely hers. Chapter 38, Nightfall Surrender. The house was quiet, the night wrapping itself around the rooms like a soft blanket. Amara had barely realized how close they had been walking together from the garden, Rux's hand never leaving hers, fingers intertwined as if it had always been the way. They moved to the living room, where soft lamplight cast golden shadows across the walls. Amara's heart thudded in her chest, but Rux's presence was a calm anchor. Every brush of skin, every shared breath, grounded her in a way she hadn't known she was craving. Rux leaned down, lips meeting hers in a slow, teasing kiss, letting Amara respond in her own rhythm. Fingers traced along arms, across shoulders, gently exploring without haste. Amara's hands wandered, tentative at first, then bolder as she felt the steady, unwavering trust in Rux's touch. "You don't have to be afraid," Rux murmured against her lips, voice low, intimate. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Amara exhaled, letting the words sink in, letting herself relax fully into the warmth, into the steady pulse of Rux's body beneath her hands. She let herself explore the contours of closeness, the curve of a shoulder, the press of lips against neck, the subtle hum of breath meeting breath. There was no rush. Every touch, every kiss, was deliberate, tender, reverent. Amara marveled at the attentiveness, at how Rux moved with patience and care, letting each sensation linger, letting trust grow with every heartbeat. She had never known such tenderness, such quiet devotion and intimacy, and yet, she realized, this is what she had always longed for. Their bodies shifted together, slowly, naturally, becoming attuned to the smallest movements and responses. Amara's fingers tangled in Rux's hair. Rux's hands traced gentle lines along her spine, grounding her, showing her that surrender was safe, that desire could coexist with care. In that soft, golden room, Amara understood something profound. Home wasn't a place, it was this. Rux, steady and patient, anchoring her in every kiss, every touch, every shared breath. She had found a haven in a person, not walls or rooms, and it was far more breathtaking than anything she had ever imagined. Hours slipped by unmarked, measured only by the slow rise and fall of their breathing, by whispered words that needed no explanation, by kisses that deepened with trust and mutual reverence. By the time they finally pulled back, it was with soft smiles, lingering touches, and hearts utterly entwined. Amara rested against Rux's chest, letting herself simply exist in the warmth and certainty of presence. And in that moment, she realized she had found everything she didn't even know she was searching for. Rux's steady hands held her close, and Amara let herself be fully, completely, finally home. Chapter 39. Morning Reverence. Sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, spilling golden threads across the room. Amara lay awake for a while, not moving, simply watching. Rux stirred beside her, stretching just enough to reveal the quiet strength in her body, muscles lean, movements controlled, effortless. Every small motion held grace, confidence, and a calm that tugged at Amara's chest. Amara traced the line of Rux's jaw, the curve of her shoulders, the sweep of honey-blonde hair catching the light, and felt a swell of awe she hadn't realized she was capable of feeling. This was the woman she had fallen into, the woman who had anchored her, steadied her, and made her feel safe to exist fully. Rux murmured softly, still half asleep, a smile tugging at her lips, and Amara's heart fluttered at the sound. She had spent years running from shadows of the past, but now here, she could simply breathe. She could watch. She could marvel. There was no need to speak. No need to move too quickly. The quiet hum of morning, the gentle warmth of Rux's body beside her, the faint scent of sandalwood and sun-warm skin, all of it spoke more loudly than words ever could. Amara finally reached out, brushing a hand across Rux's arm, letting herself feel the steady pulse beneath. Rux's eyes opened slowly, meeting hers, and the private smile that passed between them was enough to set Amara's chest alight. "You're amazing," Amara whispered, voice low, reverent. "I can't believe you're here. I can't believe you're you." Rux shifted just enough to nuzzle her forehead against Amara's, eyes soft, patient, and grounding. "I'm here," she murmured. "And I'm not going anywhere." Amara exhaled, letting herself sink further into the quiet of the morning, into the steady warmth, into the marvel of the woman beside her. She realized, with a thrill that hummed from her chest to her fingertips, that she had found something she hadn't even known she was seeking, a home not of walls or spaces, but of presence, strength, and care. And there they stayed, letting the morning stretch around them, letting the light spill across their entwined forms, letting silence speak volumes. Amara watched Rux as if discovering her for the first time all over again, heart swelling with gratitude, awe, and an unshakable certainty. This was the woman she had always wanted, the one she would never let go. Chapter 40. Alina's Curiosity. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the driveway as Alina pulled up, her car crunching softly on the gravel. She had been looking for Roxandra all morning, her concern tinged with the quiet suspicion that something had changed, something she couldn't quite name. Rux was there, leaning against her truck, rolling her overnight bag to the side, the faint scent of earth and sandalwood clinging to her. She looked different. Lighter somehow. Easier. There was a soft glow in her posture, a subtle warmth in her eyes, and Alina's heart tightened with curiosity and a pinch of envy. Roxandra Lahovery, Alina called, stepping out of the car, voice casual but carrying a thread of something deeper. "You've been hiding out here or something?" Rux straightened, turning with a small smile, the corners of her lips tugging upward in a way that made Alina's chest ache. "Just came back for a change," she said lightly, brushing at her hair. "Needed the bag for a couple things." Alina's eyes roamed over her sister, taking in the ease in her movements, the glow of her skin, the soft energy that seemed to hum around her. And then she noticed the subtle shift, the lingering glances, the faint smile that didn't seem meant for her. "Rux, you've been different lately," Alina said slowly, tilting her head, studying her. "Happier, I mean. Lighter. There's something going on, isn't there?" Rux shrugged, letting a small, knowing smile play at her lips. "It's nothing, just new plants, new clients. Keeps me busy." Alina narrowed her eyes, unconvinced, but she didn't press. Not yet. She had learned with Rux that pushing never worked, observation did. She simply watched, silently noting the way her sister's shoulders relaxed, the soft curve of her smile, the way her gaze seemed to linger on some invisible point. "And, whoever it is," Alina said, voice teasing, "I want to meet her. The woman who makes my sister look like she's finally alive." Rux's smile softened, a warmth in her chest at her sister's words, but she didn't answer immediately. She only nodded slightly, letting Alina watch the way she carried herself now, how the light around her seemed steadier, warmer, more complete. Alina stepped closer, curiosity piqued, but respect intact. She didn't need answers yet. She only needed to see that her sister had found something or someone that mattered. And if Rux wanted her to meet her someday, she would wait. But for now, Alina was content to observe, quietly marveling at the rare, undeniable happiness emanating from the woman she called her sister. Chapter 41. Worlds Collide. The late afternoon sun dappled the garden, casting playful shadows across the flowers and shrubs that Rux had nurtured so carefully. Amara was kneeling beside a patch of newly planted blooms, hands in the earth, when Alina stepped quietly onto the stone path. Rux looked up from adjusting a trellis, a smile tugging at her lips as she noticed her sister's presence. "Alina," she greeted softly, the warmth in her voice unmistakable. Alina's eyes immediately fell on Amara, sitting among the plants, hair catching the sunlight, fingers gently brushing petals as if she had always belonged here. And in that moment, Alina felt it the way they moved around each other, the subtle touches, the soft laughter, the unspoken understanding. They weren't just together, they were home to one another. "You must be Amara," Alina said finally, stepping closer, voice filled with quiet admiration. "I've heard so much, but seeing you like this, seeing her like this, thank you." Amara rose slowly, brushing dirt from her hands, and met Alina's gaze. "You should be thanking Rux," she said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. "For letting me be myself. For accepting me without trying to change me. She's the reason I can be here, right now, like this." Alina's eyes softened, and she turned to her sister, who simply nodded, her ever-steady presence grounding the moment. "She's always had that," Alina murmured, almost to herself. "She just found someone worth showing it to." Rux glanced at Amara, a faint blush coloring her cheeks, and squeezed her hand gently. The unspoken gratitude passed between them, Amara for Rux's patience, Rux for Amara's trust, and Alina took it all in, her heart swelling with quiet pride and relief. "You both," You belong together, Alina said finally, smiling warmly at Amara. It's clear. And I'm grateful you found her. Amara returned the smile, her gaze soft and full of emotion. No, she whispered. I'm grateful she found me. And allowed me to stay. The garden fell into a gentle hush, sunlight catching the edges of leaves, petals, and fingers intertwined. Alina watched, quietly marveling at the effortless way these two women fit together, as if they had always been part of the same story. And for the first time in a long time, Alina felt a quiet certainty. Her sister had found her home. Chapter 42. A Weekend Away. The drive out of London was unhurried, the city slowly fading behind them, replaced by rolling hills, fields of gold and green, and the open promise of the countryside. Amara sat beside Rux, watching her hands on the wheel, the calm focus in her eyes, the faint smile that made Amara's chest ache with quiet admiration. I haven't done this in forever, Amara murmured, letting herself relax into the seat, her mind unclenching for the first time in years. Just leave everything behind and be. Rux glanced at her, sea blue eyes soft. Then don't think, she said gently. Just be. I've got you. By the time they reached the cabin, a small, timbered refuge nestled at the edge of a quiet forest, Amara felt the tension in her shoulders ease. She hadn't thought about emails, meetings, or deadlines since leaving the city. All that existed was this moment, this presence, this quiet surrender. Rux opened the cabin door, the smell of pine and firewood greeting them. She moved naturally, letting Amara's hand linger in hers as they stepped inside. There was no grand fanfare, no elaborate gestures, just the soft click of the door behind them and the shared ease of arrival. Amara breathed in, letting the crisp country air fill her lungs, and felt a profound sense of peace she hadn't known she could feel. With Rux, showing up didn't mean performing. Staying didn't mean proving anything. Being present was enough. Being herself was enough. They spent the afternoon exploring the nearby trails, fingers brushing naturally, occasional laughs spilling into the open air. Rux pointed out wildflowers, tended to a small patch of herbs near the cabin, and Amara followed, mimicking her gentle, patient movements, letting herself simply exist beside her. By evening, they returned to the cabin, a fire crackling in the hearth. Amara curled beside Rux on the worn rug, leaning into the warmth and steady heartbeat beside her. I forgot what it felt like, Amara whispered, voice low, reverent. To not have to fill space, to just be here with someone, and it's enough. Rux pressed a kiss to her temple, fingers tracing the line of her jaw. You've always been enough, she murmured. You just needed the right place and the right person to remember it. Amara exhaled, letting herself sink further into that presence, letting the quiet pulse of the country, the cabin, the fire, and Rux's steady hands wrap around her heart. For the first time in forever, she could just be. And in that simplicity, that grounding, that effortless belonging, Amara realized that with Rux, home wasn't a building, a city, or a life carefully constructed. It was her. Chapter 43. Night in the Cabin. The cabin was bathed in golden firelight, shadows dancing across the walls as the wind whispered through the trees outside. Amara lay beside Rux, shoulder to shoulder, the steady warmth of her body grounding every thought, every flutter of anticipation in Amara's chest. Rux's fingers brushed along her arm, light, teasing, deliberate. Amara's breath caught, and she realized again how effortless it was to surrender here, to lean into Rux's presence without hesitation. There were no expectations, no alarms, just the soft rhythm of shared heartbeats and quiet trust. You feel like home, Amara whispered, voice barely audible over the crackle of the fire. You make everything feel like I can finally breathe. Rux smiled, tilting her head so their foreheads touched. Then breathe, she murmured, lips brushing Amara's temple. I'm here. Always. Their lips met slowly, deliberately, lingering in the sweetness of discovery. Amara let herself melt into the warmth, the patient, steady attention in Rux's touch. Fingers traced lightly over shoulders, hands tangling in hair, skin pressed to skin with a gentle, reverent curiosity. Every kiss, every brush of hand or breath was measured and intimate, a tender exploration rather than a rush to an end. Amara's eyes fluttered closed, letting the warmth of Rux's body, the scent of sandalwood, the quiet murmur of her voice, settle into every corner of her being. She had never known such tenderness, such attentiveness and desire, and yet it felt like she had been waiting for it all her life. Rux guided her slowly, softly, with patience that was grounding and thrilling all at once. There was laughter when fingers tangled awkwardly, gentle sighs as lips and hands traced new paths, and a quiet intimacy that stretched far beyond the physical. Time seemed to blur, measured only by shared breaths, lingering kisses, and whispered words. Amara lost herself in the sensation, in the gentle way Rux brought her to climax, and realized that home wasn't a place, it was this: steady, patient, grounding, enveloping. Rux wasn't just desire or attraction, she was sanctuary, safety, and the quiet answer to a longing she hadn't fully acknowledged until now. By the time they finally rested, bodies pressed together, firelight flickering across their faces, Amara let herself simply exist, held, loved, and utterly at peace. Rux's steady heartbeat beneath her ear was a lullaby she didn't want to end, a rhythm she knew she could trust. And in the quiet aftermath, Amara realized with awe and relief that she had found everything she didn't even know she was seeking, and it had been waiting in Rux's presence all along. Chapter 44. Closure. The city hummed quietly around them as Amara unlocked the front door, Rux beside her, hand still warm in hers. Their weekend glow lingered between them, a gentle warmth that made every step toward home feel lighter, freer. But when the door swung open, they weren't alone. Reese stood at the foot of the staircase, a small box in her hands, the soft weight of a passport peeking from the top. She paused for a moment, taking in the scene before her, Amara's relaxed posture, the subtle way she leaned toward Rux, and Rux's patient, attentive presence, everything Reese had never been able to offer. Amara froze, a flicker of old tension sparking in her chest, but Reese's expression was calm, reflective, almost wistful. "Amara, I called. You didn't answer." Her gaze flicked between Amara and Rux. "I came to grab a few things from the attic. Still remembered where the keys were," Reese said softly, her eyes meeting Amara's. "Passport, a few documents, nothing more." She lifted the box slightly, as if to confirm her purpose. Rux stepped back just enough to give Amara space, her hand brushing against Amara's lightly, steady and grounding. Amara drew a slow breath and met Reese's gaze. Then Reese smiled, faint and genuine, and the tension in the room shifted. "You've found her," she said quietly, nodding toward Rux. "I can see it. I see how she looks at you, how you are with her. I could never give you that. We were too different. I wanted excitement, ambition, movement, but you needed calm, steadiness, care. And she gives that. She completes you in ways I never could." Amara's chest tightened, emotions swelling, relief, gratitude, something like closure she hadn't thought possible. "Reese," she began, but Reese held up a hand, stopping her. "No need," Reese said gently. "I just wanted you to know I'm glad you found her. You deserve this, Amara. You deserve someone who sees you, all of you, and still stays. Someone who chooses you every day like she does. I am truly sorry for everything." Rux's fingers entwined with Amara's again, and Amara felt a quiet joy ripple through her. No arguments, no recriminations, just understanding, honesty, and the graceful ending to a chapter that had once held so much pain. Reese turned, lifting the box in one hand and giving Amara one last nod. "Take care of each other," she said softly, and with that, she left, footsteps fading up the stairs and out of the house. Amara exhaled, leaning into Rux's steady presence. I think she meant it," she whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "I think she's really happy for us." Rux brushed a kiss across her temple, a soft, grounding touch. "She is," Rux murmured. "And now we can finally just be." Without shadows, without hesitation. Just us. Amara smiled, letting herself fully absorb the moment, the freedom, the care, the unwavering presence of Rux beside her. For the first time in years, she felt truly, completely at peace. And in that quiet, warm space, she realized that home had always been more than a place, it had been a person. And that person was Rux. Chapter 45. Words at Last. The late afternoon light spilled across the garden, golden and forgiving, as Amara and Rux tended to a small patch of newly planted flowers. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of earth and sandalwood, a perfect quiet that had settled between them over the weeks. Amara paused, hands in the soil, and looked up at Rux. Heart hammering softly, breath catching in a way that made her dizzy with both anticipation and relief. I need to tell you something, Amara began, voice low, almost reverent. Something I've been feeling for weeks. No, months, actually. Since the day you hummed under my window, tending to my garden, Roxandra Lahovary. I've been falling for you. Rux froze, hands still on a small sapling, and slowly turned to face her. Sea blue eyes searched Amara's hazel ones, a quiet intensity that made Amara's chest tighten. Anne. I love you, Rux, Amara whispered, letting the words tumble free. I have for a long time, even before I allowed myself to see it. And I can't hide it anymore. Rux stepped closer, her presence steady, comforting, grounding. She reached out, brushing a strand of black hair from Amara's face, letting her fingers linger. Amara, she murmured, voice soft, certain. I fell before I even met you. I fell for your quiet, careful presence, for letting me shoot hoops in your garden without question, for trusting me without needing to see me first. I love you too. I've loved you from the very beginning in the small, quiet ways that don't always get noticed. Amara felt the words settle around her like sunlight warming her soul. She leaned in slowly, letting Rux's steady hands guide her, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling, hearts sinking in a rhythm that had been quietly building for weeks. You make it easy to love, Amara whispered. And you make it worth loving, Rux replied, pressing a soft kiss to her temple, then another, slower, more deliberate on her lips. Always. They stayed there, hands tangled, breaths steadying each other, the world around them fading into quiet gold. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just the undeniable, intimate truth of two hearts finally, fully acknowledging the love that had always been there. And in that moment, with fingers intertwined and hearts bared, Amara realized that every longing, every hesitation, every small, unspoken spark had led her here, to the steady, grounding presence of Rux. To love, finally, given and received without fear, without hesitation. Home was no longer a place. Home was Rux. Epilogue. Home. The morning light filtered softly through the bay window, touching the wooden floors and spilling across the small kitchen where Amara moved with ease. It was ordinary, unremarkable, yet everything felt right. Rux's clothes had migrated naturally into the cupboards, her toothbrush resting beside Amara's as if it had always belonged there. The small, quiet rituals of shared life had settled in around them, threading a soft comfort through every corner of the house. Amara hummed quietly to herself, pouring tea into 2 mugs, when the soft crunch of gravel reached her ears. She turned, smiling, as Rux emerged from the garden, dirt still clinging faintly to her hands and sleeves, the scent of earth and sandalwood trailing behind her. In her hands, Rux held a small, delicate ring, intricately woven from vines she had nurtured in the garden. She knelt beside Amara, eyes bright, voice steady but tender. I never want to be anywhere else, Rux said simply, holding the vine ring out. Not anywhere but here with you right now. She held out the ring. Amara Akadina, will you continue building this life with me? Amara felt her chest tighten with emotion. Amara didn't answer with words. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her pocket and drew out a ring of her own, a slender band engraved with both their names intertwined in ivy. I made this for you, Amara said softly, tracing the delicate engraving with her finger. Just like you've guided the ivy to grow, you've guided me home. Every small, patient step, every quiet moment of care, it brought me here. To you. To us. She knelt beside Rux, holding out the ring. Rux smiled, eyes glistening, and took Amara's hand in hers. Rings were slipped on trembling fingers. Their fingers intertwined, rings resting against each other, a perfect mirror of the bond they had nurtured in the silence, the laughter, the earth, and the light. No words were needed after that. They kissed softly, slowly, deliberately, savoring the quiet, ordinary perfection of the moment, the grounding presence of each other, the shared heartbeat of two lives finally entwined. Outside, the garden swayed gently in the breeze, the ivy climbing steadily, petals brushing against sunlight. Inside, two women sat together, hands entwined, hearts aligned, the quiet truth settling around them like a warm, unshakable embrace. Home wasn't a place. Home was here. Home was each other. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like this video and follow me for more stories. You are always welcome here, and leave me a comment or a thumbs up, just letting me know if you like the story and would like more, or is there perhaps an idea that you would like to share or let me write for you.